Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. And if there was a definition of a jam-packed episode, it would be this one. This is the post-Super Bowl episode. So, of course, we have to talk about some of the biggest trailers, including, of course, the Thunderbolts trailer. And, of course, this is the week of Captain America Brave New World. And I will be giving my thoughts, my review of Captain America Brave New World at the very end of this podcast. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, let's see, how things shake out here. And we'll, of course, be doing more segments and talking about Captain America Brave New World as the weeks go on and as we head into Daredevil Boarding End. But, there's been some discourse and there's obviously the reviews are out. And so, I'll give my own thoughts and then we'll talk about that more in my review. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining for another week of the Access Blockbusters Pod. It has been such a joy, as always, to join you guys again here. And if you are listening on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, give the video a like if you are interested in more content. We have Oscar season coming up. I'm very excited to talk about that in the coming weeks. We also, of course, have Daredevil Born Again as the TV shows continue to ramp up. Andor is coming in a couple months. Obviously, we have movies like Mickey 17. A lot of things to look forward to. And I really want to see Paddington in Peru. I don't think I'll be able to see it in time for next week's episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod, but hopefully I'll be able to do a segment in a couple weeks, and so that will be a good time. So anyways, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like if you enjoy, and if you're looking forward to those, hearing me talk about that. And leave a comment with any of your thoughts on these topics as well. And if you're interested in the audio-only platforms, because we do have those as well, the podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast. Make sure to go check it out over there as well. Guys, it is jam-packed. So without further ado, let's get into the topics. Alrighty, guys. So Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was interesting. And I'm not even talking about the quality of the film. I mean, we can have that discussion of whether or not I liked it another day. I don't think I've really touched on it that much on the channel other than the couple ranking things I've done, which, by the way, native plug to that live stream I did a little while ago where I ranked every single MCU movie before Captain America Brave New World. So anyways, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was interesting. I say that because it, the entire run up to the movie, the entire, I guess, speculation on the internet from the MCU side was who's going to die, which is a very morbid thing to think. But, James Gunn and the rest of the cast were really hyping this movie up as the final Guardians film. This is going to be it for the Guardians as we know them. And they're going to kind of ride off into the sunset. And the assumption was that a lot of them were going to die. Well, it turns out none of them did. And not only did none of them die, but I would argue that a lot of their endings were just kind of left there. Just like any other MCU movie. Sure, the Guardians team, as we know them, it's different, for sure. But Drax is still just hanging out there, and, Mantis is still hanging out there, and Gamora is still out there. The random multiverse Gamora is still hanging out there. Peter is on Earth, because apparently Star-Lord is going to return. So, anyways, these characters are still hanging out there. But I think it became pretty clear that despite whatever happened at the end of the Guardians films, at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, even with this new Guardians film, our Guardians team of Rocket, Groot, and Adam Warlock, and all these other people. Phyla, I believe is her name, one of the children there on Counter Earth or whatever. Whatever this team is going to be, who knows, right? Kraglin as well. But I think that this iteration of the Guardians is done. Now, the question then becomes, right, when you're doing a film like Avengers Secret Wars or Avengers Doomsday, where I've said this before, I think everybody and their mother is going to be in this movie. I really just think every single Marvel character that has ever appeared, under a movie with the Marvel banner is going to be there. Well, it looks like there will be at least one semi-noticeable absence, and that's because Drax the Destroyer, Dave Bautista, has indicated that he will not be returning to Drax. So he gave a couple quotes here in this interview, and we're going to read it out here because I think this is pretty definitive. I mean, he does say that he would return to Guardians, kind of, if there was a condition, and that condition he admits is just not going to happen. And he's talked to the Russos of maybe even playing another MCU character, but I don't even know if that's going to happen at this point. So, anyways, this is what Dave Bautista had to say. He says, quote, "Drax is completely close to me. Unless James Gunn called me and asked if I would do something as Drax again, I just wouldn't be interested. If James called me, which obviously is not going to happen, he's doing okay." He's talking about James Gunn. He's doing okay. He's gone a different route. And that's obviously talking about James Gunn's role as the co-CEO of DC Studios. Dave Bautista continues, quote, "But I do want to be in that world. I'm a fan of that world. I'm a fan of comic books and that whole universe," Bautista said. And then, quote, "Marvel DC, I just want to be in it. I made that known to James. I made that known to the Russo brothers. Personally, I talked to them, all of them, and told them, don't count me out. if there's a character that I'd be right for and that you want me for, man, I'd be totally open-minded to it. It's just the Drax character has run its course. Okay. So that's interesting because he's told the Russos that, first of all. The Russos who are directing well, they did direct Infinity War. I'm saying they're going to direct Secret Wars and Doomsday. But, Secret Wars and Doomsday, not the best places to just introduce new characters, especially with Dave Bautista recastings, unless the multiverse plays a big part in that. So it's possible. But, with Dave Bautista saying, hey, look, I'm done. Drax is done. Looks like we will not be getting Drax the Destroyer. We may be getting other MCU characters that were in those Guardians films. Who knows? Maybe even Zoe Saldana will appear again in Doomsday and Secret Wars. I would assume Chris Pratt will show up for Doomsday and Secret Wars. Maybe Pom Klementieff and Bradley Cooper, Vin Diesel, right? I'm sure that those characters will show up again, members of the original Guardians team. But it looks like Dave Bautista says, no, I am done with Drax. Obviously, we've been talking for a while now on the internet about the fact that Dave Bautista seems like he's very eager to join the DCU with James Gunn because he loves James Gunn. And it looks like this is a reaffirmation of that. So again, just to recap here, it looks like Dave Bautista really is saying, I am completely done with Drax, probably not even for Secret Wars or Doomsday at all. Guys, do you think that there is a chance Dave Bautista ever returns to the MCU as Drax, or do you think he's completely done? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man continues to surprise me. We are going to be talking about episodes 6, 7, and 8 in full spoilery detail. So if you guys have not seen your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and there have been 8 episodes now, and I think there are only going to be 2 more, 9 and 10, before the end of this first season, which this series has been renewed already for 2 more seasons, which is, I think that's great news. And I'm not going to bury the lead, guys. I've really been enjoying the series, and I really enjoyed these 3 episodes, so I think I can finally say, before we get into the full spoiler discussion, I can say it now. Guys, if you haven't been watching this series, I would really encourage you to go check it out. I know it's not something that a lot of us were excited for beforehand. I mean, you can go check out my reaction to the trailer. I still think the trailer itself was not the greatest thing, but this series has really surprised me. So before we get into all the spoilery detail, make sure to go check out the series and then come back and you can hear my spoilery thoughts about these 3 episodes. And you can go check out my spoilery thoughts on the previous 5 episodes in previous episodes of the Access Blockbusters pod, as well as in those individual segments on the channel. Okay, all of that out of the way. Let's talk about these 3 episodes. So again, I mean, just to recap quickly, I went into the show with 0 expectations. I thought the trailer was just not great. I was like, what are we doing here? Why are we making a show like this when it's, we've already gotten our amazing MCU Spider-Man. We already have, the Beyond the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse films. And look, I'm the first one to admit here, I'm not the number one fan of those films. Not to say I don't like it. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just not saying that I'm saying that I'm not one of those people who think that those films, Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse are the best Spider-Man films ever made. I know that a lot of people do, but I am not one of them. But I do really enjoy them. And it's just weird. It felt weird to me. I was like, why are we doing this? But I watched the first 2 episodes. And again, I go into anything I watch, no matter how low my expectations are, with an open mind. And I thought, wow, this is really surprising. This is really good. And episodes 3, 4, and 5 continue that. Some great character work we're doing here with Lonnie, with Peter, Nico, Harry, and it all continues in these 3 episodes. So I took some notes, not as heavy notes as I usually do with some of the other shows like, Penguin or Dune Prophecy or Agatha All Along, but, just some preliminary notes here to talk about and just to get the conversation going. So we'll go through episode by episode and then I'll kind of wrap it up here. Episode 6, well, if the title didn't give it away, because I think it's something about the devil, it's the Daredevil episode. And yeah, not to bury the lead here again, but Daredevil is awesome in this episode. But we'll get there in just a second. So first of all, we start out here with Pearl again, and she doesn't know, and she's just really trying to figure out what's going on here, because I think one of the greatest things this show has done, although I will say it's starting to spin its wheels a little bit, I think, with Lonnie, because I think the show thus far, the biggest surprise in a pleasant way to me has been the character development of Lonnie. And it's just not a character that I was familiar with. I didn't even really know Tombstone other than the name vaguely. And to have all this character development for Lonnie Lincoln is just a great thing. And so I feel really bad for Pearl, because at the beginning of this episode, she doesn't know what's going on. I will say, by the time we get to the end of episode 6, because I know we're heading towards some big confrontation, I'm sure, between Peter and Lonnie and probably Scorpion and whatnot. So I'm sure we'll get some more stuff there. But I think at the end of these 3 episodes, that arc is starting to spin its wheels a little bit, but I'm sure it's just kind of stalling until we get to the actual conclusion here. And then poor Peter also trying to do good by Nico, and that relationship, Nico, Peter, Harry, starts to develop a little bit more in interesting ways, right? Those the individual relationships between those those three characters on their own, and then of course all three of them together. I think it's really interesting. He's just trying to help, or he's trying to make good. He's trying to be a good person, as is his nature. The Spider-Man Peter Parker character. But he's trying to make Nico and Harry like each other, be friends, and it's not working out. It's really awkward, between Nico and Harry at the beginning. Then we get to this kind of charity event about Lagos, which is what happened in Captain America: Civil War with the Scarlet Witch and Thunderbolt Ross. Look, I mean, this is a week for Thunderbolt Ross, right? Because Thunderbolt Ross is obviously showing up in Captain America: Brave New World very prominently, played by Harrison Ford. But we have another version of Thunderbolt Ross in the multiverse, and here he is. He's just showing up here. And Norman Osborn, using Spider-Man to kind of make underhanded government deals with Thunderbolt Ross is a very shady Norman Osborn kind of thing here. Norman Osborn also just continuing not to treat his son well, calling Harry to get to Peter and check out the security thing that's going on in Oscorp, which of course we knew was Daredevil. The second he said that, or the second we saw the security camera, I was like, yep, that's Daredevil. But yeah, I think the development of that relationship between Norman and Harry is going to continue. And I'm sure Norman's going to die at some point, and it's going to be Harry's going to take up the mantle of Green Goblin. It's going to be sad in one of the next two seasons. But yeah, I think that is something else to monitor as well. But Daredevil, guys, Daredevil shows up and they play the theme music from the Daredevil show. I love when they do that, honestly. It's kind of cheesy, but when Charles Xavier shows up in Multiverse of Madness, or Ms. Marvel is revealed to be a mutant, and they kind of play the X-Men 97 theme, or even the little thing where Daredevil's like, hey, I'm Daredevil in She-Hulk. By the way, apologies for the sirens in the background. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, he's like, I'm Daredevil, and they play the little hit from the theme. I think it's fun. And so I love how they're playing the music, the theme music, and the fight scene. The second this scene just started at all, because again, I think one of the things that this show does really well is that this version of Spider-Man Peter Parker is very adjacent to the Tom Holland version. Hudson Thames, I think, is doing a very good job of approximating Peter Parker, while also making this role his own, right, and fitting into this show. And based on that, I'm now dying to see Daredevil and Tom Holland's Peter Parker meet up at some point. I really am. I don't know what's going to happen with Spider-Man 4, but man, this scene sold me. Like the first 5 seconds of their interaction alone. And the action scene is shot so well, and it's clear that they paid so much attention to this, and they really wanted to get it right, and they did. And then, Norman Osborn blaming Daredevil, right, by saying he was working with Octavius. Yeah, that's shady. We'll get more into Norman's shadiness in episode 7, and then Nico finds out, and we get a Scorpion, and that is episode 6. Episode 7, moving on here. Also, the other thing, I guess the one thing I noticed heading into episode 7 is I generally, for most shows, except for Friends, skip the intros, because I just, I'm like, yeah, let's get a move on. 30 seconds, let's move on here. And especially the previously ons, I skip them. But, when you skip the intros, right, it usually ends on the very end of the intro. And for Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, they always end on this kind of comic book cover panel, right, of what the episode is going to be about. And I realized that's really what the appeal of this show is. Because people have been like, oh, what's the point of this show? Like, even if you like it, why are we doing this show when you have, a movie like Into the Spider-Verse or Across the Spider-Verse? But for me, I think there's a distinct difference here between what these two things are trying to accomplish, even though, yes, superficially, they're both animated Spider-Man properties, media, television, movies. I think what this show is trying to accomplish is it's almost like the experience of reading a comic book. They have the entire rogues gallery of Spider-Man. We get Chameleon later on as well, Rhino, Dr. Connors is there, Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, Scorpion, we're just waiting. We got kind of a Venom creature, I guess, at the very beginning, but I'm sure we'll get Venom later on as well. So I think that it's the experience of reading a comic book, but brought to life, and I really, really like that as well. So anyways, we get now some more backstory, I guess, about Otto, and I guess he's trying to harness gamma radiation, and then we get some scenes here with Harry and Nico bonding. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, probably of the 7 episodes or the 8 episodes thus far, I think the Nico Harry racing stuff was probably my least favorite part of the show. It's fine. I think the development of their relationship together as friends is interesting enough, but it wasn't, I think some of those scenes where, especially the racing scene where they were just racing against that random woman, I was like, yeah, I don't know. It wasn't my favorite stuff here. But what was really good was the end fight with Peter, Spider-Man, and Scorpion. So obviously now Pearl knows everything, and the Scorpion action is very cool. And Norman clearly does not care about Peter in this scenario. And yeah, he gets really, he gets beat, and it's very much similar to what happens to the MCU Peter Parker on the New York ferry, Staten Island ferry, and Norman's like, yep, just trying to find Otto, and he gets stabbed. And so, when Peter cries out for help, and when Norman, it shows that Norman's gone from the command center, I was like, oh, okay, is the Green Goblin actually showing up? Because look, one of the things that has been kind of up in the air so far in the series is really what Norman Osborn's character development and motivation is. Is he true insane goblin at this point? Or is he more just kind of, evil businessman? Or what is he? What's the deal here? And I think this show, at least this scene, because he has the glider. So we see the glider, but we don't see Green Goblin. So it makes me wonder. I still think, I lean to the side of he's not full Goblin yet, but probably by the end of the series, he will go full Goblin. And so we'll see about that. Episode 8 then. So poor Peter now, he just wants to do good. The Peter and May scene, it's very similar to when, Peter comes home from having failed on the ferry. It's very sad. It's a very sweet scene between the two of them. And then Doc Ock, I love the Doc Ock, escape scene where he's just kind of strutting around with the jazzy music kind of playing in the background while he wrecks shop. And then Iron Man shows up. That was unexpected. It was also kind of unnecessary. I don't know what the point of that was, but Iron Man shows up, so that's cool. Iron Man. And then Peter and Pearl start getting close, and Peter tries to convince Lonnie, let's not do this, right? But Lonnie, of course, doesn't listen. Peter tries. And so then, we have this talk between Peter and Norman, and, just when you think Norman is kind of on the good side here, he gives this line, with great power, and I was like, oh, okay. So we got Norman Osborn saying it, and he says, comes great respect. And all of a sudden you're like, it's a twisted version of everything going on there. So you kind of get what's going on with that. We also get a quick shot of Chameleon. Okay, random. And then, Chameleon, I guess not random, because Chameleon was one of those guys on the truck earlier who had, was using that Octavius tech. And the episode ends with, Harry making Peter his classic suit, and we are off to the races. So guys, the finale, last 2 episodes are coming up. I've really enjoyed this show. I'm very excited it's coming back for another 2 seasons because it's been a big surprise to me, and I'm very enthusiastic. I'm very hopeful that this series can continue to really explore parts of Spider-Man that the MCU just doesn't have time for. Because look, if the MCU wanted to have all these different villains in one Spider-Man film, it would just be way, way too much. And Spider-Man is definitely not getting a TV show. We're not doing a Tom Holland Spider-Man TV show just because the character is too big. So this is perfect for me, honestly, as an MCU and a Spider-Man fan. Guys, what did you think of episodes 6 through 8 of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man? Are you still enjoying the show, or maybe it's tailing off for you? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, everyone, we are now heading into Oscar season, and that means that other awards shows are happening as well. And yeah, it means the Oscars are a couple weeks away, which is crazy. It's exciting. And so, what happened this past week? Well, the Critics' Choice Awards happened this past week. So I wanted to take some time to discuss the winners here, not in as great detail as we did with the Golden Globes, because I think, there's a lot here. And also, as I make my way through all of the Oscar films that I wanted to see. I'm not done yet, but I'm actually almost done. I think I have maybe a couple more films left to see. So as the months and the weeks go on, as we head towards the actual Academy Awards, my idea of these films and how I think they stack up against one another, regardless of my own opinion, just sort of why they got nominated and what they did well, what they didn't do well, according to critics, it's beginning to take shape, and I'm excited about that. And so, again, I wanted to just take some time here, because look, we don't take any of these other awards, like the Golden Globes or the Critics' Choice Awards or the Screen Actors Guild Awards, the WGA, DGA. We don't take any of those awards to be the be-all, end-all for Oscars, right? It's not like there's a formula where you go, oh, if the film wins X number of awards, and if it wins these specific kinds of awards, then it's a lock to win the Oscar. Oscar voters are Oscar voters, right? And the Critics' Choice Awards, I believe they're critics, they're their own voters, and the Golden Globes, it's the Hollywood Foreign Press, I believe. So everyone has their own voting bodies, and everyone thinks differently. But momentum is a very real thing, right? I think if you watch sports, you'll know this. Momentum is a very real and tangible thing. And these things don't happen in a complete vacuum, right? So again, the Oscar voters may be looking at this and going, oh, okay, interesting. And then kind of making their own decisions. Not to say that they're not making impartial decisions or anything like that, but momentum is a real thing. So I'm going to go through the list of winners, and what we're going to do, we're not going to go, again, as in-depth as we did with the Golden Globes. I'm going to kind of skim through, look at the winners, and see if there are any surprising omissions or snubs or whatnot, but really just look at the winners and see is it in line with the narrative that we've been seeing thus far, heading into the award season and also post Golden Globes, and then see, how the thinking might have changed going into the actual Academy Awards. I'm not going to give, and again, not going to give my official predictions here. If you want to stay tuned to the YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe, give the video podcast segment a like wherever you're watching, because in a couple weeks, I will be doing my full predictions of all the Oscar categories, or at least the big ones. I don't know about documentary short or, all that kind of stuff, but the big ones, I will be doing my own predictions, and also I'll be doing a separate ranking of all of the Oscar films that I've seen. I haven't seen, I'm not planning on seeing every little, Oscar film. I say little, just to describe the detail, like the quantity, right? I'm not going to see every single one. But I have made it a point to see at least all the Best Picture winners and a few of the other ones that were nominated for prominent acting categories as well. And so hopefully we will get there. I'm almost done. I think I have a couple more. So it's, again, I'm filling out my picture of what these movies look like and how they stack up against one another, what they're good at, what their strengths are heading into the season, etc., etc. That was a big intro to this segment, but let's actually get into the winners. So starting off here with the movies. Best Picture, Anora actually won. And this is interesting. Right away, we have a big shift in momentum because The Brutalist looked like it was going to really just start to pile on wins, at win after win after win, heading into the Oscar season, and that was the presumptive favorite. But then Anora comes out of nowhere. And Anora, if you guys remember, actually before the award season even started, Anora was kind of the quiet unspoken favorite amongst a lot of people. And then The Brutalist came along. The Brutalist started to take all those awards, and people were like, oh, yeah, okay, The Brutalist. And also you had Emilia Perez, which I'm only going to discuss, I guess I should mention, I'm only going to discuss the controversy surrounding Emilia Perez, insofar as things have happened, right? Things have definitely happened since the Golden Globes of the main actress who plays Emilia Perez said some things on Twitter that were very bad and made some comments. And so you can check out other YouTube videos. I've been watching some of videos like Dan Merle's, for example, where he explains the whole thing. So I'm not here to litigate, and I'm not here to rehash the whole narrative, but I will say that whether or not Emilia Perez had any chance to win these Best Picture awards, I think it's all but gone. I personally don't think it ever did, really, although it was much higher up than it is now, in my opinion. So, again, just wanted to point that out here as well. We'll talk more about Emilia Perez as we get to other categories later on. Let's move on to Best Actor, Adrien Brody, The Brutalist. This is one that is going to, that is, well, at least currently holding the line, and I don't expect that to change. Other actors like Timothée Chalamet, Daniel Craig, Coleman Domingo, Ralph Fiennes, Hugh Grant, all really strong contenders as well, but this one I think feels like, at this point, Adrien Brody's to lose. Best Actress, Cynthia Erivo, Carlos Sofia Gascon, Emilia Perez again, if she had any chance, I think it's gone. Angelina Jolie, So Mikey Madison is interesting because she did not win. Demi Moore won for The Substance. This is her second win now, and this is kind of a surprise because entering the Golden Globes, people were like, whoa, Demi Moore, okay, she won the Best Actress award, and people were like, is this a one-off or is this going to continue? And then fast forward, and she wins again for The Substance. So this is interesting because if Anora is really getting all the momentum back, it's interesting that Mikey Madison herself, who plays Anora, is not getting that kind of same momentum because she has not won so far in any of the categories. So Demi Moore seems like she is all of a sudden not just becoming the dark horse, but becoming a slight favorite. So we'll have to see about that. Best Supporting Actor, Kieran Culkin. Again, it's continuing on with that same momentum, same narrative. Best Supporting Actress, Zoe Saldana, who, again, going back to Emilia Perez, I think that Zoe Saldana is trying her absolute best to stay away from everything else that's going on here. Whether or not the Oscar voters will see it that way and will be fine with voting for her as the winner, because I do think that momentum is really on her side. Honestly, for me, Ariana Grande gave a fantastic performance in Wicked, and based on these other performances, because, Margaret Qualley is here as well for The Substance, but Margaret Qualley wasn't even nominated for the Oscar, so she's not even going to be in the Oscar consideration, even though she was really good in The Substance. Isabella Rossellini was in Conclave, and honestly, I'm kind of confused because she gave a great performance in Conclave, but she never stood out to me as much as other people like Ariana Grande did, for example. So I find that interesting. So for me, I would look out for Ariana Grande, to be honest. And I think that that's a crazy thing to say. If you had told me that I would be saying this a year earlier, I'd be like, no, that's crazy. Ariana Grande? What? For an Oscar? No. But again, I think it's really going to come down to whether Oscar voters can separate what's going on with the film itself, Emilia Perez, and what Zoe Saldana gave. Because even then, even if you didn't like Zoe Saldana's performance, which I thought it was good, it was pretty good. It seems like it has all the momentum going forward. So we'll see. This category, I have no idea what it is. Best Young Actor / Actress, I've never heard of it. But Maisie Stella for My Old Ass won for Best Young Actor. Okay, I don't know anything about that category. So yeah, some of these categories for the Critics' Choice Awards are a little strange. Best Acting Ensemble goes to Conclave, which again, we're not going to talk about this too much because, they're not in the Oscars. But Wicked seems like an interesting snub. It was nominated. Also, Saturday Night. I haven't seen Saturday Night, to be fair, but Saturday Night feels like also a very big ensemble that people spoke very highly of, so kind of interesting. Best Director. Another winner that wasn't even nominated, John M. Chu for Wicked, and I applaud this because, look, I mean, you might be one to say, well, but the artistry of The Brutalist for Brady Corbett, who very well might win the award, or Sean Baker for Honora, who very well might win the award, or Coralie Farge, who may very well win for The Substance. You might be like, oh no, but their artisanship and their vision and whatnot, and I get that. I think that they all directed their material incredibly, incredibly well. But the fact that John M. Chu didn't even get nominated, and of course Denis Villeneuve also didn't get nominated for the Oscar, and he's also nominated here, which is great to see. But, I mean, the Herculean effort it must have been to direct those songs and to direct just everything going on in Wicked. And, I get it that people are like, well, but, the musical was already there, so we had a template to work. It doesn't really matter to me. I mean, Nickel Boys, for example, based on a book. So there is, of course it wasn't adapted, right? But I don't think it, at least. But so I get that there is, sure, there's a visual element and you can kind of base the costumes and stuff. But like the directing, I just think it's baffling that John M. Chu isn't getting more love for Wicked because, he did an incredible job with that movie, in my opinion. So that's interesting that he wins. And I think good for him. If he's not going to even get nominated for an Oscar, good for him that he wins here. Best Original Screenplay, Coralie Farge, The Substance. I think that's pretty interesting. I think that a lot of these films, honestly, this one is very up in the air for me because in terms of screenplay, whether or not I like the films or not, Honora, great screenplay. September 5, I haven't seen it yet, so I can't really comment. The Brutalist, just great screenplay. A Real Pain, really good writing. Challengers, I also haven't seen. So again, I think this one, for me, might be anyone's guess, and I might be monitoring this one until the last second until I do my predictions. Best Adapted Screenplay is Conclave, and I think this one is going to be Conclave's to lose. It's just been winning and winning and winning. Best Cinematography goes to Nosferatu, which I can see it. There's a lot of really great contenders here, obviously. Wicked, The Brutalist, Conclave. Conclave, I think Conclave was shot really well, but compared to Dune Part 2, and I think Nickel Boys has the novelty factor of being shot in first person, and it was shot really well, but I think The Brutalist stands out, Wicked obviously stands out, and obviously Dune Part 2. I don't know, guys. Dune Part 2, it's hard to argue with Dune Part 2. Granted, I haven't seen Nosferatu, and I know that I've seen the trailers, and it's shot very stylistically and very well, so I don't know. But, Dune Part 2, it's hard to argue, and Greg Fraser is an icon in this space, so. Best Production Design goes to Wicked, I think deservedly so. That's great. Best Editing goes to Challengers. Interesting. I think it was also nominated for an Oscar in this category, so we'll see if that has any bearing later on. Best Costume Design goes to Wicked. Yup, that makes total sense to me. Gladiator 2, Dune Part 2 for sure. Conclave, sure, Conclave, but not to the scale of Wicked. So I think Dune Part 2 and Gladiator 2 are probably its biggest competition, but I think Wicked deserves it by far and away. Best Hair and Makeup, though, does not go to Wicked, which was also nominated, but actually goes to The Substance. And I actually, for once, I'm not going to jump on the Wicked bandwagon. I actually agree with this. The Substance, for those of you who have seen The Substance, does a lot with hair and makeup. And it is freaky and it is crazy, but it does a great job at conveying, what it wants to convey. Whether or not I liked what they conveyed, in terms of looking at it is another story. But in terms of what they were able to do, it was actually quite phenomenal. And then Best Visual Effects goes to Dune Part 2, which I'm really happy about. Although I will say, I think Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes has an argument here, just because of the sheer motion capture and apes CGI. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But I'm happy for Dune Part 2, and we'll see if it continues that momentum. Best Animated Feature does not go to Flow, because if Flow wins here, you start to think, okay, maybe Flow is starting to get that momentum and really steamroll to the win. But here, The Wild Robot. And now I think it once again becomes an open race between Flow and The Wild Robot, and we'll see where it goes from there. This is interesting. Best Comedy, well, A Real Pain, which, I don't know, it was amusing in some parts, but it was also kind of sad. But then, another winner, they have a tie here, Deadpool and Wolverine is a Critics' Choice Awards winner. Great. Out of these films, I haven't seen many of them, to be fair, but Deadpool and Wolverine has won a Critics' Choice Award, so there is that. Best Foreign Language Film goes to Emilia Perez over I'm Still Here. Again, it will be very interesting to see whether the Oscar voters will continue to vote for Emilia Perez, even in these kinds of categories, because I don't think they will for Best Picture, but we'll see if they will for Foreign Language Film. even though another Oscar Best Picture nominated film, I'm Still Here, is nominated in this category as well. And speaking of which, Best Song El Mal by in Emilia Perez is also nominated. And so again, same kind of thing there. And also another song from Emilia Perez was nominated there as well. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Best Score actually goes to Challengers, which was also nominated. So we'll see if Challengers has a leg to stand on there. Dune Part 2, Emilia Perez, Wild Robot, Brutalist, Conclave. Yep, the usual suspects here. And then we're going to go through TV very quickly because we've kind of been going long already. But, Best Drama, Shogun. Shogun has been basically sweeping all the categories. Best Actor goes to Shogun. Best Actress goes to Matlock, Kathy Bates. Really happy for her. Best Supporting Actress goes to Shogun. Best Supporting Actor goes to Shogun. Again, sweeping all of these categories. Best Comedy, Hacks. Guys, because other people actually were nominated for Shrinking in another category, Shrinking won. Where is Shrinking? That's my obligatory Where is Shrinking mention in every single awards video. Best Actor in a Comedy Series, Adam Brody, who I thought almost was Adrian Brody, which I was going to be super impressed if he was doing comedy series as well. Nobody Wants This from Netflix. And then let's move on. Best Actress in a Comedy Series goes to Jean Smart from Hacks. So Hacks is also winning big in this category. But then, Best Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series, Michael Urie for Shrinking, which, great. Again, great. The fact that this is the only nomination, though, because Harrison Ford, I think, deserved a Best Supporting Actor nomination in a Comedy Series at the very least. Having, again, with the huge caveat that I haven't seen a lot of these shows, have been focusing on the movies for now, in terms of the Oscar race. So we'll see. I mean, I guess, in the future, if I watch these series and go, yeah, maybe all of them are better than Harrison Ford. I find that hard to believe, though. And also, I mean, I liked Michael Urie a lot. I like his character a lot. I forget his name. He's the best friend, right? I like him a lot. I really do. Is he the fact that he's the only one that's nominated, though, it's kind of baffling to me. Hacks also wins for Best Actress in a Comedy Series, and then we get to Best Limited Series, and here we have The Penguin was nominated, Baby Reindeer won, Best Movie Made for Television was Rebel Ridge, and then we have The Penguin actually winning huge here in this limited series or movie made for television category. Colin Farrell wins Best Actor. Kristen Milioti wins Best Actress. Amazing. Love to see that. If there is any doubt that Penguin is going to get a season 2, I think it is being squashed as we speak. Best Supporting Actor in a limited series, Liev Schreiber, The Perfect Couple. Never heard of it. Best Supporting Actress in a limited series, Jessica Gunning for Baby Reindeer. So that's, again, winning big. And then we have Best Foreign Language Series, which goes to Squid Game. Oh, Squid Game. There we go. I actually didn't see that at first. Best Animated Series goes to X-Men 97. So there you go. The MCU gets a nod. Best Talk Show, John Mulaney. Best Comedy Special, Ali Wong. And I think there is one. Nope, that is it. Okay, so guys, those were the winners for the Critics' Choice Awards. And look, I mean, there are some interesting narratives going on here entering the Oscar season. Number one, being that Anora has suddenly come out of nowhere and resuscitated itself and its chances for a Best Picture win, which is interesting. Other categories like Best Supporting Actor, Kieran Culkin seems like it's his to lose. Best Actor, Adrian Brody seems like it's his to lose. But the Actress category, Demi Moore coming out of nowhere, not nowhere, but coming out and really solidifying herself as I would say the front runner for Best Actress. And Supporting Actress, I think, is totally up for grabs. I think for now, we'll place the incumbency on Zoe Saldana. So Zoe Saldana, excuse me. But I think Margaret Qualley would have had a chance if she was nominated, and Ariana Grande, I think, has a chance, which is super interesting. So we will see about that. Guys, what do you think about these winners for the Critics' Choice Awards? Are you surprised by any of these picks, or do you think this all makes sense to you? And do you have any updated Oscar predictions based on this? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, so before we get to any of the trailers, in fact, before we get to the trailer for the movie we're about to talk about, because of course we're going to talk about all those trailers, including the Thunderbolts trailer, but let's talk about this little interesting thing that came out a couple days after the Super Bowl trailer. So, the Thunderbolts trailer comes out, and I have my thoughts on that, we'll talk about that later, but, I've been, just even before the Super Bowl trailer, I've been really enjoying the marketing for Thunderbolts, but the question that's been on a lot of people's minds, even for those of us who are really excited about Thunderbolts, is what in the world is that little asterisk at the end of the title? Because Kevin Feige, well, first of all, in the initial announcement, right, when Thunderbolts was first announced, and then the concept art of the lineup came out, and it was just a normal title. It was just Thunderbolts, in fact, in kind of rocky gray lettering, which I thought was fine. It wasn't the best, logo, but it was cool, right? And then, randomly, they added an asterisk at the end of it, and also they turned it into a really lame, thin font, just plain text title, which maybe goes to the fact that, they might be changing the title. Then, with this most recent trailer, they changed the type font again. And now it's a little bit thicker, almost not Comic Sans, like Impact style font. And it still has the asterisk at the end. So, and also, they released a poster with, highlighting this asterisk. So, they've been kind of playing into it. Kevin Feige has said that they're not going to talk about it until after the movie comes out. So, I guess it's pivotal to the movie somehow. But the other day, right after the Super Bowl came out, they released some international posters. And one of the posters had something interesting because it was the poster that you might have seen, not the Wheaties one. The Wheaties one is funny, where they're all kind of posing like they're on a cereal box. But it's the one where it's basically the 6 prongs of the asterisk, and each character occupies one of those prongs, right? And Bob Sentry is kind of peeking his head out at the bottom with Yelena, and that's really cool. It's a really fun concept, right? Playing into it. But then, at the very bottom, in very small text, there is the asterisk, because asterisk in... if you're doing a presentation or if you're writing something, usually denotes that there is a footnote, right? There's something that you want to look at or look for later on at the bottom of a page, right? And so you look down at the bottom, and lo and behold, this poster says asterisk, the Avengers are not available. Let me repeat. It says the Avengers are not available. Now, again, without talking about my thoughts on the trailer, because I want to save that for later on in the podcast, I mean, at the beginning of the Thunderbolts trailer, Valentina, right, Val, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, says something to the effect of, the Avengers aren't coming. Who's going to save us? The Avengers aren't coming. And so this seems to play into that somewhat, right? Because, yeah, I mean, it seems like it's indicating that, your heroes are not here. And what does that mean? Who knows? But your heroes, the Avengers, are not coming. And that's an interesting thing in and of itself. So does this mean then that the asterisk mystery is solved? Because I made a theory a few weeks ago on the podcast where I talked about the fact that, yes, I'm jumping on the bandwagon. I know I was told people were like, everyone thinks this. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm also jumping on the Dark Avengers bandwagon, but I wanted to give my reasoning, my own personal reason, because I feel like I thought it through and had some interesting reasons as to why. But anyways, you can go check out that theory and let me know what you think about that. But does this actually debunk that theory? And the asterisk, the only thing it stands for is really just a footnote saying the Avengers aren't coming or the Avengers aren't here? I don't think so. And here's why. I think that, well, first of all, I think that if it was revealed this early on, then, I mean, that's kind of lame, right? And I think that if it was revealed this early on, I don't think that, it would have been hyped up as much by people like Kevin Feige and by the rest of the cast, right? I really think if it were just to be leaked, and I get it, like it wasn't on the main American posters, but it was on an international poster, but even still, it had to have gotten approved by Marvel Studios. And it's just the fact that, maybe they're going to start putting out a series of posters with different things at the asterisk, right? I don't know. But just the fact that it got revealed, and based on the amount of hype that it's been getting from these Marvel people, seems to indicate that it's much more important than something like the Avengers aren't here. Because here's the thing, right? If that were the case, if this is what it was, then Kevin Feige's kind of a liar because he's been really hyping it up and saying, no, you have to wait and see the movie. If it's really the Avengers aren't here, this could have been something that anybody could have seen before even seeing the movie. And I think that actually goes against what everyone's been saying. I think, and I'm not 100% certain on this, I think this is sort of a misdirect though. I think that while I'm not, here to say that my Dark Avengers theory, that everyone else's Dark Avengers theory, or whatever Avengers theory that they have, or team name change that they have for this, while I'm not here to say that it's definitive, right? I would put it at about 65%. I'm not putting it anywhere close to 100%, right? But I just think that, based on what Kevin Feige has been saying, this is something that is somewhat pivotal to the story that they can't discuss until after the movie comes out. That was his words. Those were his words. He said, we're not going to discuss this until after the movie comes out. And if all you have to discuss after the Thunderbolts comes out is, oh, yes, that's right. The poster was right. The asterisk stands for Avengers are not here. Okay. I mean, maybe that has some really deep significance to the MCU. Maybe all the Avengers are dead or something. I don't even know. I don't know what this could mean, other than just the Avengers aren't assembled again. And that's like, yeah, we've been watching the MCU, or at least, I have. I don't know about you guys. I've been watching the MCU for a while now. The Avengers aren't there. We know this. They're not here. So again, it's kind of confusing to me that this international poster has something, related to the asterisk. But to me, I think this is more of a marketing ploy, and I don't think this is actually what it means. Guys, do you think the asterisk mystery has been revealed, or do you think that this is a misdirect like me? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, so with the DCU continuing to head in, well, a positive direction, positive meaning it's continuing to go on, we are getting more and more details about different projects that are happening. Case in point, we've been getting a lot of well, reports from these sources like Deadline, Variety, Hollywood Reporter about all these various projects that are in development, like Bane and Deathstroke and this, the Teen Titans movie and all that kind of stuff, in addition to all of the previously announced films like Booster Gold and Swamp Thing, which we got some updates on from James Mangold. But another film that's actually, it almost seems like it's being fast-tracked because I guess James Gunn, who, if you guys don't remember, earlier on said his philosophy with DC was going to be that he was only going to greenlight films if he was happy with their scripts. And lo and behold, it seems like he's very happy with the script for this upcoming Clayface movie, because Clayface has been fast-tracked. Remember in that original DCU announcement, right, where he was giving the initial slate, or at least a group of projects that was going to release in the first little chunk that he was calling Gods and Monsters? There was Swamp Thing, Booster Gold, Brave and the Bold, the Paradise Lost series, Lanterns, but nowhere in there was Clayface, right? The assumption was Superman and then Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, and those are the first two films coming up. But then right after that is going to be Clayface, and Clayface is now, so it's being written by horror. Legend seems like a little bit of an exaggeration, but horror, movie director staple in the Hollywood industry, Mike Flanagan, who developed Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor. He did Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining. So he's been doing a lot of horror stuff. And I think he recently described the film as a sort of horror tragedy, sort of a tragic protagonist, because Clayface is one of the most notable Batman villains in the Rogues Gallery. So it's interesting, the theme of gods and monsters, right? Clayface is also a very interesting character because in live action, I think we've seen some iterations of Clayface in live action in the TV shows, but nothing really in the movies. And so Clayface is an interesting character because, as seen in the Harley Quinn show, which he's more of a comedic character, voiced by Alan Tudyk, and also voiced by Alan Tudyk actually in Creature Commandos, where he, I guess, canonically is now in the DCU. And I'm presuming that that's the iteration of the character that will be in this upcoming Clayface movie. But he's a shapeshifter, right? So when he's not a shapeshifter, he's just kind of a big lumpy blob of clay, and so I guess they're gonna have to CG animate that, and then it's gonna be interesting to see what versions of the character, whether or not Clayface has a persona, that is gonna be played by a famous actor, or that if he's just the whole thing throughout the movies, he's gonna be played by a lot of different actors. But anyways, that's so just setting the scene here that this is going to be a more horror tragedy forward kind of movie, and it's going to be releasing in fall of 2026 as of right now. And now we have a report from Deadline that says we are getting pretty close to finding a director, and the director choices here, I think, reinforce the direction that they're going in. So according to this report from Deadline, they're not saying frontrunners, but they're saying in the mix, right? So it's not like, these two directors are going to be the only two choices to direct this Clayface movie, but it's Truth or Dare's Jeff Wadlow and Speak No Evil's James Watkins. Speak No Evil was, I think, the remake that had James McAvoy this past fall. And yeah, I mean, both of those are kind of horror thriller sort of films. And the Deadline article also says, quote, at the same time, there's buzz that the casting process has begun. Once a filmmaker is attached to DC and said director will mull on the actors being assessed, and then whoever is chosen as director will weigh in on the casting choices. That's pretty standard for all this Hollywood affair. And then it goes on to talk about Mike Flanagan. The other interesting note, though, before we talk about my thoughts on this, just really quickly, is that it seems like the Clayface film so it's going to be produced by James Gunn and Peter Safran, but it's also going to be produced by Matt Reeves and Lynn Harris, who are I suppose, I mean, Matt Reeves obviously, but Lynn Harris as well, are shepherding the Batman universe. And then obviously it's going to be developed by Mike Flanagan. So as of right now, the assumption was, and I still think the assumption is, that this DC Studios film, Clayface, is going to be part of the DCU. It just makes sense. But I'm more curious almost of what Matt Reeves' involvement is in these DCU films. Is he helping to shepherd the story of the DCU as well? It seemed pretty clear that the Batman universe was separate from the DCU, but it's just kind of an interesting thing that, Matt Reeves is getting his hands involved in this as well. I think the Arkham Asylum series that was originally going to be part of the Batman universe is now going to be, a part of the DCU. So, and it's going to be still produced by Matt Reeves. So we'll see. We'll see where we go from here. But anyways, these directing choices, I think, make clear that this film has a very clear direction, iteration. Just like how James Mangold, when he talked about his Swamp Thing movie, was like, yeah, this is going to be a sort of a gothic horror sort of tragedy as well. This is going to be a more horror thriller kind of tragedy with a protagonist like Clayface, and protagonist in air quotes, because we'll see how far they push this into. Is he a villain? Is he going to be a sort of a Venom kind of anti-hero, or is he just going to be a misunderstood protagonist? We'll have to see about that. But guys, what do you think about the progress being made on this Clayface movie? Are you excited, first of all, for a Clayface movie, or is this a project where we're still in wait and see mode? Let me know in the comments down below. All right, guys, so The Batman Part 2 has been a bit of a mystery in terms of its production because the first Batman, Batman Part 1, or just The Batman, came out in March 2022, and it was awesome. It was great. And then, in late 2024, which is not a huge gap between the movie and the TV series The Penguin, although Matt Reeves wasn't the one directing and writing The Penguin, but he was overseeing it in a certain sense. But The Penguin came out a couple years later. But, we were all looking at The Batman Part 1 saying, okay, so the film came out sort of at the tail end of the pandemic, and, I do think that those kinds of films coming around the 2021-2022 era took a decent hit, right? I think it's fair to wonder if The Batman came out in, let's say, 2019, if it could have approached the $1 billion mark, because I believe it made something like $700 million. So, the question really was, people loved The Batman, right? It has a really good critical rating. I personally really like The Batman. It's one of my favorite Batman movies, and it made a lot of money. So you're going to make a Batman Part 2. But the production of the Batman Part 2 has been interesting because it's been pushed and pushed and pushed. And we've been getting these sort of, a variety of sporadic reports from different people, from James Gunn, who's like, well, it's still coming. And Matt Reeves is like, yeah, we're still working on it. But then other reports saying, well, no, it's been delayed again. And it got pushed from October 2020. Well, it was originally 2025, I think. And now it got pushed to 2026, and then it got pushed again from October 2026 to now October 2027, which is a long ways away. That's going to be over 5.5 years between the Batman Part 1 and the Batman Part 2. There were also reports saying that Matt Reeves was dealing with personal things, so there's a lot of stuff going on about this. But at the end of the day, all that stuff aside, I think the most important thing is, are we going to get the film, and is it going to be a good film? And Robert Pattinson has, put his hat into the ring in terms of commenting on all this kind of stuff. And he has said this. So he was promoting Mickey 17, which is the new Bong Joon-ho movie, which looks really great. The director of Parasite, for those of you who don't know. But it looks really great. It's getting good buzz early on. And so he was at one of the premieres for the movie. And obviously, as he's Robert Pattinson, his most iconic character right now, I'm not saying, of all time. I think Twilight and Harry Potter have obviously a claim to that. But right now, Batman, what he's doing right now that he's most known for. And so, of course, he was asked about it, and he was asked, when is this movie going to film, or is it going to film at all? And he said, quote, I think at the end of the year. And I know what it's about, and I can't tell anyone, but it's very cool. It's very exciting. So, not a whole lot that Robert Pattinson is revealing here. But what's interesting about this is that he is echoing a lot of what everyone else has been saying. I think Andy Serkis recently also made some comments, and he was like, oh, I know the story, and it's really cool. It's really great. So I find this interesting because everyone is like, oh yeah, we know the story. I mean, even Matt Reeves is like, I really like the story. It's in a good direction. And yet the other reports are saying the script isn't done. The script isn't done, and we're having problems, and it's not being able to shoot, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know what is going on. Frankly, I kind of like, in 5 or 10 years to be able to look behind the curtain and see what the production was behind this and why the script was, because James Gunn kept saying the script isn't done, script isn't done, script isn't done. And then Matt Reeves is like, yeah, we're still working on the script, but I know the story. Because everybody around the Batman Part 2, Andy Serkis, Robert Pattinson, all the other different actors, I think even Colin Farrell was like, oh yeah, I knew that I'm going to be in a couple scenes, or like 5 to 10 scenes in the movie, or whatnot. They all seem to know what the story is. And it's just a matter of getting this movie off the ground. So on the one hand, it's a good thing, right? The Batman Part 2 will be filming at the end of the year. And I actually think, I've been saying this, right? Just because a movie was pushed back to October 2027 doesn't mean it can't be pushed up again. I'm not necessarily saying that it will be pushed back to its original release date of October 2026. I believe another film took that spot already, but Warner Brothers can shift around. It'll cost them, right? I think that there is some money associated with shifting around release dates and whatnot. So it'll cost them. But if they believe that the Batman Part 2 can come out sooner, then yeah. I don't see any reason why, if you can film in late 2025, let's just say in the fall, let's be optimistic, in the fall, let's say September, and you film for about 6 months. So let's say you film, and 6 months is a long time. Like I would put it at 4 or 5 months, but let's just say 6 months. So around March, you wrap post-production for the next, 5 months or so. And then, not even 5 months, what am I saying? 7 months. Yeah, so going from March to October. So, post-production for the next 6 or 7 months, and then you release the film in October. I feel like that's plenty of time Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, because that's been my understanding of movie productions and schedules and whatnot. But I don't know. It feels plausible still that they can move the release date up, even if it's not October 2026, maybe even just March 2027, moving it up 6 months. So we'll see. We'll see where we go from there. But it looks like Robert Pattinson also has an idea of what the story is, and whether or not the script is done, who knows? But it looks like the Batman Part 2 will be filming sometime this year. Guys, what do you think about the comments that the Batman Part 2 is filming in 2025, and Robert Pattinson is very excited about the story? And what do you guys think the story could be about? Who do you think the villain is going to be? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. So on the YouTube channel, on the Access Blockbusters pod, thus far, we haven't really had an opportunity to talk about the new live-action, rebooted Harry Potter series coming to Max. And that's not because of anything in particular. I know there's a lot, to be said about J.K. Rowling, and we're not really going to get into that right now. But, it's just more so because of the fact, and again, you're all entitled to your opinions and whatnot about how you, feel about the property of Harry Potter and give it all that. But anyways, just putting that all aside, kind of like how, the Ezra Miller situation, just looking at the Flash itself, looking at this Harry Potter series itself, right? There hasn't been a whole lot of concrete news. I mean, sure, there's concrete news insofar as it's happening. It's going to take place, over the next 10 years or so, filming-wise. It's going to be 7 seasons, we think. Maybe 8, who knows. And it's going to be much more faithful to the books. That's really it. We haven't gotten concrete casting. Sure, we've gotten rumors, like the Brett Goldstein as Hagrid rumor, which is, it's interesting casting for sure, but nothing concrete. Well, that is all but changed, because now, Deadline has reported that we might have our casting for Dumbledore. And I have 2 thoughts on this. One more positive, and one a little more, I'm not going to say negative, just a concern of mine. So, first of all, we have to say this again, because I want to preface this by saying, why does he talk about all these different things, but he doesn't talk about, the Brett Goldstein stuff and whatnot? I really try in the Access Blockbusters pod to talk about things that are confirmed, all but confirmed, and if I want to talk about rumors, making very clear that I'm talking about rumors and not reports, right? And like I've been saying, again, you guys might be sick of me saying this, but it just has to be made clear, right? I don't talk about leakers and scoopers and whatnot just because, and I don't report them as news just because I don't think that they're on the same tier of reputability as sources like Deadline, that we're going to talk about right now, Variety, and The Hollywood Reporter. Doesn't mean that they don't get things wrong sometimes. And we'll talk about the fact that Warner Brothers seems to be either playing coy or just saying, no, that's not true, based on Deadline's report. But it's usually a good sign to take it to the bank if they're reporting these things. So, all that being said, we got a report from Deadline, and this report says we have our cast, or rather an actor, is very close to nearing a deal to play Dumbledore. And that actor is none other than John Lithgow. Now, John Lithgow he's a prolific actor. In this article, it points out, and I didn't even know this, he's a 2-time Oscar nominee and a 2-time Tony nominee. So he's very, very talented, obviously. We saw him, I think, very briefly in Conclave. I believe he was only in the film for a little bit. I could be completely wrong about that. Conclave, by the way, a film that I love. But he's doing a lot of stuff. He does a lot of stuff, right? He's in a lot of TV shows, a lot of movies. He's just sort of been all over the place in terms of, not in terms of, his quality of acting or whatnot, but just in terms of the projects that he likes to do. And I really respect that. So John Lithgow, and the article describes him as a beloved actor, playing a, one of the most significant roles in the high-profile series. And the article says this is in final negotiations to portray Professor Albus Dumbledore. And then, like I alluded to before, HBO has declined a comment, and their quote is, it's sort of PR speak. It says, quote, "We appreciate that such a high-profile series will draw a lot of rumor and speculation. As we make our way through pre-production, we will only confirm details as we finalize deals." So probably, I don't think it's necessarily them denying it. I think it's more just like, say what you want. We can't say anything until the deal is finalized. And sure enough, right? The article says that they're in final negotiations and not a finalized deal. So I think that is totally fair to say. Now, here's a couple things, right? I said at the beginning, I have 2 thoughts, one more positive and one more negative. So let's talk about the positive one first. You get talent, right? For any kind of series, but especially series as high profile as this. You got your Harry Potters, your Game of Thrones, your Last of Us's, talking about TV, and Andors, and Daredevil Born Agains or whatnot. You get high profile talent, right? Any kind of high profile proven talent is good. And we're even talking about the movies as well. Like, remember for the MCU, getting people like Lawrence Fishburne and Michael Douglas, Robert Redford, Anthony Hopkins, it brings, not just a certain credence to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they're good actors. They're amazing actors, right? So, yeah, getting good talent, and John Lithgow is a talent. He is really talented as an actor is always a good thing. And so, yeah, sign me up. Dumbledore, great. The article points out he is actually American, which is kind of funny. Obviously, Harry Potter being a British-based property. So, but again, the article then points out that he has played British people before. I haven't seen him play a British person, so I don't quite know how believable, like if his accent is terrible. Like, for example, every time I watch Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder, I like Tessa Thompson a lot. Her British accent isn't fooling anybody, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. So again, I don't know. Maybe he will be totally unconvincing as a British, Albus Dumbledore. But anyways, I think that's maybe less of the point, just the fact that they got a very talented actor. So that's the positive thing. Here's my one actually pretty glaring, and I would not say this is a small thing. I don't think it's like, those book fans who, I'm not talking about Harry Potter in particular, I'm just talking about, book fans of any property where they're like, that's not the right color hair, they shouldn't have that color hair, or his or her eyes are not the same color as described in the books, or they're not the right height, or what. It's not like that. Because again, for me, those things aren't important. They're really not important. Stay true to the character, yes, but those kinds of things, it's like, whatever. Just be true to the character, be true to the story, and you'll be fine. That's my thought. Here's what's concerning to me, though. And I do not want to get into a morbid place because, talking about people's lives like this in a callous way is not something I want to do. So hear me when I say, I'm not saying this about the person's life. I wish John Lithgow a long, happy life. He is 79 years old. And this Harry Potter series is going to be going for 10 years, is the report. And that's believable, right? The film's filmed for about 10 years or so. And just based on production schedules, even if they try to get a season out every year, it's probably going to be maybe like a few months in between, and they're going to be filming for, 6 to 9 months. So yeah, John Lithgow, as of right now, is 79 years old, which means by the time they start filming the first season, he's going to be 80. By the time the series is done, he could be 90 years old. And spoiler alert for the book series, but Dumbledore has a role in every single book. Sure, a very small one in the last one, obviously. But he has a pretty significant role throughout the entire series. And actually, one of his biggest roles is in the 6th book, the second to last one, when he'll presumably be 88 years old. So it's a little odd to me, honestly, because, and again, not to get morbid or anything, I just want to, say this for context. Richard Harris, right, the first Dumbledore actor, who unfortunately passed away after the Chamber of Secrets, was much younger than John Lithgow is. He was 72 when he passed away. And I think Michael Gambon, who did a great job, I think, in my opinion, being a different kind of Dumbledore for sure, but fitting those darker movies, I think he did a great job. But again, I find it really hard to believe, and we're not even talking about passing away, we're not talking about any of that, just the fact that he would be up for filming really rigorous scenes in his late 80s, as the role of Dumbledore actually continues to expand as we learn more about him and his relationship with Voldemort and his relationship with Grindelwald and Snape and all these different things. So I don't know. I get it, like, get good talent, but there has to be some foresight into this, right? Like, there's a reason you don't cast a 30-year-old actor to play a freshman year Peter Parker. You could. They basically did that with Tobey Maguire. But, just as an example, like, it's maybe not the wisest thing because you want the character to grow as the series or as the movies go on. And so sure enough, you cast Tom Holland, and he is obviously a little older than the 14 or 15-year-old kid that he played in Homecoming, for sure. But, he grows into the role, right? And by the time the series, the original trilogy ends, he's a high school senior, and you believe it, right? You're like, yeah, this is an 18-year-old kid. I don't know. I'm a little confused by that, to be quite honest with you. I would, if this casting is made official, I would then be very happy that it's official, because again, it's talent. But I would also be thinking, okay, at what point does John Lithgow say, you know what, this might be enough? Or maybe he just wants to play Dumbledore until he's 90 years old, and if that's the case, good for him. So honestly, I don't know. Maybe it's not a concern at all, but it's just something that I wanted to point out, because that's the first thing I looked up, honestly. Not just because of, not just because John Lithgow is an older man, but just because in any of these roles that people are going to be cast in, this is a commitment, right? Unless you're playing Quirrell, right? Because there was a rumor that Cillian Murphy was going to play Quirrell. That's a half a year kind of commitment. That's fine. But if you're going to be playing Lupin, you're going to be there for at least 5 years. Sirius Black at least 5 years. Harry, Ron, and Hermione obviously are kids. Snape is obviously a 10-year commitment. So it's just going to be interesting to see. what happens there. But guys, are you excited? Would you be excited for the casting of John Lithgow as the new Dumbledore in the HBO Harry Potter series? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, so we have a lot to look forward to in the MCU. We'll obviously be talking about my thoughts on Captain America Brave New World at the end of this podcast episode, so stay tuned for that. But just in general, I think the MCU, even regardless of my thoughts on Captain America Brave New World, which again, we'll talk about, but, I think that the MCU is certainly seeming like it's on an upswing, right? With Daredevil Born Again, and then you have Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four, I'm sure Ironheart, Wonder Man, not as excited about, but I even like Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. So it seems like the MCU is heading in a positive direction at the very least, right? It seems like they're just trying to close out the multiverse saga in as positive of a way as possible. And then I think we're going to get that. I suspect we're going to get a really big wave of positivity and good vibes and good receptions with, the upcoming X-Men film, and you got your Shang-Chi 2, Black Panther 3, maybe Thor 5, who knows? But Black Panther 3, Doctor Strange 3, I think that the upcoming films are going to be all good. And key, I think, amongst all of those films that have not entered production yet, although in pre-production, is Spider-Man 4. Now, Spider-Man 4 is currently slated to release in July of 2026, right after Avengers Doomsday and before Secret Wars. There have been a lot of rumors. I'm going to say rumors because I think that not a lot of this has been confirmed. Like Tom Holland hasn't gone on a podcast because he went on a podcast and confirmed, Spider-Man 4 is happening. He went on Jimmy Fallon and confirmed Spider-Man 4 is happening. So that's Tom Holland. That's coming from the source. He hasn't then, come out and said, oh yeah, we're going through some delays and stuff, because what he said on those podcast episodes and those interview appearances was that he was really excited by the story and he wouldn't come back if he didn't like the story. So there have been reports that the whole story is being upended and whatnot. I find it a little hard to believe. Maybe there's some script changes and things going on just based on the story of the MCU so far, but I find it hard to believe that Tom Holland, who is in a position of authority, at least right now, and he has some leverage, just in terms of the fact that he is one of the executive producers, I believe, on the film, and, different things are going on that he can have a bigger say, like his contract status and whatnot. So I find it hard to believe that he signs on to the film and then watches the whole script crumble around him and he's like, oh yeah, we're still excited about it. We'll see. Maybe that is the case. I don't know. But anyways, so people have been kind of doubting, is Spider-Man 4 going to happen? Is it still going to film this year? And recently, we got a report, or we got some quotes here from an executive, the financial chief at Sony, and he had this to say about the production and the ongoing schedules of Spider-Man and also Jumanji, I guess. But anyways, so he's made some comments, and this is what he had to say. Quote, "In motion pictures, there is still some impact of the strike, such as postponement to the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2027 of theatrical releases of the next Spider-Man and Jumanji movies. However, production activity is recovering." So there you go. There is, I guess, a hint here that the Spider-Man film, Spider-Man 4, is still on track for its release date. He didn't explicitly say in this quote that Spider-Man 4 is going to happen in hitting its original July 2026 release date. He said there has been some impact, and it's kind of hard because this quote is a little cryptic, honestly, and so I'm trying to figure it out as we go along. But he said in motion, so in movies, right? There's still some impact of the strikes, which makes sense, such as the postponement of, I'm assuming that, he means to say the postponement of certain films like Spider-Man 4 and the next Jumanji to the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2027, which encompasses, right, it goes from April 1st, pretty much 2026 to March 31st, 2027. And yeah, Spider-Man 4 still fits in that window. Is this him saying that Spider-Man 4 is delayed but still going to appear, before March 31st, 2027? Because, to be frank, right, sure, it would be great to see Spider-Man 4 in July 2026. And for all we know, it has to appear right after Doomsday in order for the story to continue. We don't know. But if it comes out any time before March 31st, 2027, as of the current slate of the MCU, it will still come out before Secret Wars. So as of right now, it still seems like it's cushioning between that that 1 year release window between Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. So we'll see. We'll see about that. I guess this is a reaffirmation that Spider-Man 4 is on track in some sense, and we will still be getting that film sometime in 2026, or, maybe it gets pushed to February 2027, which is not, I think, the best release date for a Spider-Man film. That feels like either a Christmas or summer release, so we'll have to see about that. But I think, at the very least, it's not a bad sign. It's not like the financial chair comes out here and says, yeah, we're going to have to delay Spider-Man 4, and it's going to have to come out a little bit later, so we will see about that. Anyways, guys, what do you think about this quote here from the Sony financial chief? Do you think Spider-Man 4 will hit its original release date of July 2026, or do you think it will get delayed again? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, we have a small update to Avengers Doomsday. It feels like we've been getting these updates in very small increments, little drizzles and drops here and there, which, you know, it's better than nothing, I suppose. But, I mean, really, we're just looking forward to more full cast announcements. And, yeah, I mean, sure, we've gotten some confirmation. Like, apparently, Chris Evans and Haley Atwell are going to be in the film, although Chris Evans denied it, so we'll see. But Robert Downey Jr., I think it's really going to start feeling real once we start seeing set photos and once we know who the cast is, because I think the second we hear or we see Robert Downey Jr. in some kind of costume on the set of Avengers Doomsday, it's just going to start to feel real. Because right now, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, it just doesn't feel real to me right now. And I know that, you know, the Roosters are on board, but I mean, we've had so many different directions and so many different versions of this movie that I don't know what to expect. So we'll see. But we've gotten a very small update for the film. It was actually kind of buried in an article from The Wrap, which is another one of those reputable sources. I don't usually quote The Wrap that much, but when The Wrap releases something like this, they're generally pretty accurate on this. So they were discussing something about London and productions in London, and they just you know, put in the little nugget that Avengers Doomsday is going to start filming in March of 2025 in London. I believe this comes from The Wrap. I don't actually have the access to the article, but this news has been reported and re-reported from The Wrap from various other news outlets. So it looks like Avengers Doomsday is going to start filming very soon. Now, this is good, actually, for a couple of reasons. Because, number one, there were some reports, and I think even some direct quotes from people you know, involved with the production, that the script hadn't been written, or the script hadn't been finalized for, you know, well into late 2024, even long after they made the announcement of Doomsday and Secret Wars, with the Russo brothers returning. So it was a little concerning, right? Because on the one hand, I was like, well, I mean, you're bringing back McFeely, so, you know, it seems like you have a plan here. But then we get reports like the script isn't really finished, or they're still working on it. And even early into 2025, I think the rumors were, yeah, well, they're still working on the script. So if they have a production start date, it means that the script is in a good place, at least. Now, we talked about this before. Marvel is not as shy about this as DC, because, you know, the DCU with James Gunn is now operating on, if you have the finished script, then you're going into production. And if you don't, then you're not going to production. Marvel, again, we've talked about this, has actually a good deal of success in general when they don't have their scripts finished. Doesn't mean that not having a finished script is a good thing inherently. It just means that, well, for Marvel, they've figured out something at the very least to work around it most times. So we'll see about that. But yeah, it just means that, you know, Avengers Doomsday is getting closer. And it also means that I think they have their ducks lined up at this point, because it's February, which means that Avengers Doomsday could be filming within a month. And that means all the stuff that, you know, Benedict Cumberbatch, who didn't know he was Doctor Strange or in Doomsday and then did know he was in Doomsday. Because honestly, you know, that whole, I think it was Vanity Fair that did the original piece where he wasn't in Doomsday, where he said he wasn't in Doomsday. I have a suspicion that was probably recorded or interviewed or whatever they did, you know, written down a while ago, and they just released it recently. I have a feeling that that's the case. I could be wrong about that. And so then when he made the correction, I'm pretty sure he's known for a little bit that he's in Doomsday. If they're going to start filming in March, I mean, even if he was going to film for a week in late May, right? He has to know that well in advance, right? And presumably Marvel Studios would have known that, so they would have told him. So I'm sure that he knew, right? I'm sure that he knew at the time of the Vanity Fair piece releasing, and then he just had to figure out a way to tell people. He's like, no, I'm actually in it. So we'll see about that. But yeah, guys, I think this is only good news, because it means that we're getting closer to the 5th Avengers film. And look, I'm not expecting Infinity War. I'm not expecting Endgame, right? I'm expecting more, honestly, if we can get something closer to the first Avengers, where it's like people coming together for the first time, and we're like, wow, this is awesome that people are coming together for the first time, then I'd be really happy with that. So we'll have to see what goes on with Doomsday. Again, I'm still waiting for a full cast list. I think that is really the most important thing to me right now. But yeah, guys, I mean, Doomsday is getting closer. What do you guys think about the fact that Avengers Doomsday is apparently filming in a month? In England, it's going to be set to film, and then the film will come out in about a year, which is exciting. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, everyone. Well, a lot has been said in recent days about Kang the Conqueror. And that's because, well, there's been a lot of drama, obviously, surrounding the whole Jonathan Majors situation. And, you know, there's been, I mean, we don't have to get into those details. In fact, I would rather we didn't get into all those details, because, I mean, that's just not what our YouTube channel and podcast are for. But just to say how it affects the Marvel Cinematic Universe, yes, it did happen. The Jonathan Majors drama did happen, and it effectively led to him being fired from Marvel Studios as Kang the Conqueror. Marvel did a huge pivot, and they went away from Kang and are now, it looks like there are basically no plans to include him in the future, and they are pivoting to Doctor Doom, played by Robert Downey Jr. However, there were some talks or at the very least some rumors for a little bit of time, that suggested Marvel may be looking to recast the character of Kang and continue on with him. And it was, at the very least, even if it wasn't a substantiated rumor, it was a possibility, right? That, Marvel had to take seriously. Whether or not we know how far those discussions went, it remains to be seen, right? We don't know that. However, one of the actors that was, kind of fan cast as the replacement for Jonathan Majors was none other than Coleman Domingo, who has been making the rounds lately in the Oscar world because he's been putting in great performance after great performance. I first, noticed him in a show like Euphoria. He was just really good in that show, and he's done only great things from here. And obviously he is in Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man as the voice of Norman Osborn, who he also, it looks like in the podcast from Josh Horowitz, Happy, Sad, Confused, he pointed out, hey, maybe I'd like to play the live action version of Norman Osborn, is at least according to some other articles. I haven't listened to the podcast myself, so just going off of what other people have said. But that's not really what we're here to talk about, because Coleman Domingo, right, he was kind of the fan casting to replace Jonathan Majors. But, fan castings are fan castings. Sure, you'll get the odd John Krasinski as Reed Richards and whatnot, but it doesn't always come to fruition like that. Well, not so fast, because it looks like Coleman Domingo actually did speak to Marvel, and they did discuss Kang to a certain extent. There's a little bit of a caveat to that, and the end result, right? The bottom line is that it's not going to go anywhere. He's not going to play Kang for, I think, a very good reason, very solid reason, and it seems to solidify the idea that they just don't look like they're going to go to Kang anyways. But I think it's really interesting to hear his thoughts, and he does seem very game to be a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe at some point in a live action role, which I think is a really exciting thing because he's just a terrific actor. He's nominated for an Academy Award for his role in Sing Sing, and I think if he was added into the MCU in live action, it would just be such a get, right? It's like, again, if Blade ever happens, but the Mahershala Ali kind of casting, 2-time Academy Award winner, getting those kinds of actors in there, always a good thing. So let's read out some quotes here from that Happy, Sad, Confused podcast interview, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. So the first thing he says, quote, listen, after a while, when it was constantly in the press and places like Twitter, he's talking about the fan castings for Kang. Anyways, he goes on, I was like, wait a minute. Is this true? Am I being talked about for Kang? So I literally called my team and asked, are you having conversations that I don't know anything about? They were like, no. So that was the first quote. And then I'm looking at an article that has a transcript here. Next quote, there have been conversations about me coming into Marvel in some way. So we did a follow-up with them with a sit-down meeting with the heads of Marvel. So I did do that. And we talked openly about the landscape of Marvel and even the Kang rumors. Okay, that's the second quote. Moving on to the third quote here. Quote, I'm just all about energy, and I just want to do things that make sense and brings gentle energy. I want a role to be mine, whatever that role is, whatever I develop. Something doesn't feel right of me. And then he quotes, I guess he's speculating here. Quote, oh, would I replace somebody? No. I said, I want to build something from the ground up that's my own. And then let's take a look here at the final quote. Quote, so I feel that was never a conversation from my point of view. You know what I mean? If I was being discussed, I still don't know if I was being discussed, but I just know that I would want to build something from the ground up. So this actually makes a lot of sense because, again, Coleman Domingo, this is all, it's kind of like life imitating art, imitating life sort of thing. Coleman Domingo sees those rumors about him replacing Kang because people just, fan castings, right? For example, it would be kind of a similar situation if inevitably they do go with a new version of T'Challa, and if it is somebody like a John David Washington who seems like a pretty prominent fan casting for the role, and it's like, it comes out later, oh, well, because he saw those rumors, he went to Marvel and was like, yeah, I'd like to play him. And I think it's a similar thing here where Coleman Domingo is saying, oh, people want me to play Kang. What's that all about? And the other really interesting thing here that I think is encouraging is that he had conversations with Marvel before. Whether or not those were the direct conversations that led straight to Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, I don't know. Maybe it came up, right? Maybe that's where that idea first initiated. But I think that his excitement to join the Marvel Cinematic Universe is very palpable here. And again, I'd love to see him in the role. But I think that what this makes clear is that the role of Kang, was at some point maybe being thrown around to be recast, and they talked about it. But talked about it can simply mean, and again, he says something like, we talked about the landscape of Marvel. He and Kevin Feige probably just sat down in a room with a couple other producers, and they were just like, yeah, so what's going on in Marvel, right? And Feige probably was like, well, this Kang situation. And Coleman Domingo said something like, well, okay, so what's the deal with that? Am I being considered seriously to be recasting? And they probably just talked about that. But look, ultimately, at the end of the day, Coleman Domingo seems pretty adamant. He's like, no, I just want to build something that's my own. And I think that's really admirable, right? You have these characters like Josh Brolin, who plays Thanos. Michael B. Jordan plays Killmonger. We're just talking about villains here. I mean, he could play hero, but I'm just looking at these villains. Michael Keaton playing Vulture. They built those characters to be their own. And you can go on the flip side. Chris Evans, Captain America, Chadwick Boseman, very sadly short-lived, but T'Challa. Tom Holland as Spider-Man. They've built their characters from the ground up, and they've done really special things with them. So I don't blame him at all. It seems to me that the plans for Kang are, if there ever were any to continue him, seems like they're not really going to happen. But who knows, right? Who knows? But at the very least, it does not seem like Coleman Domingo will be playing that version. And it looks like, just based on these quotes, it looks like we would be getting Coleman Domingo sometime relatively soon in the MCU if he really is interested and if Kevin Feige is able to find him a role that fits. So guys, what do you think about these quotes from Coleman Domingo? Do you think that Kang would have been the best role for him, or do you think that there's something else that would be exciting for him to play? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, let's kick off our coverage in today's episode of the trailers that came in and around the Super Bowl, because some of these trailers came a little bit earlier, some came a little bit later, some had big game spots that led to trailers coming out later, so we'll get to all of that. But let's start out here with the string of trailers that we got from and around the Super Bowl, starting with a movie that I frankly had no interest in. Before we get to that though, I just really want to quickly say, as a caveat, I'm not going to be talking about every single trailer that had a quote unquote big game spot in the Super Bowl. For example, I have an article pulled up with every single trailer that had a big game spot. The Smurfs, I'm not going to talk about the Smurfs, just not interested. Jurassic World Rebirth, I took a look at it, and it's the exact same as the trailer. So not going to really talk about it. We just talked about it. We talked about it in the last week's episode of the Access Blockbusters pod. Novocaine, I just am not super interested in. I don't even think I've seen the big game spot, so we're not going to talk about it. Lilo and Stitch, I thought was adorable, by the way. I thought that little thing with him running around the football field was absolutely adorable, but it doesn't give us a sense of the movie other than Stitch is really cute. So no, we're not going to talk about it. So we're going to talk about 4 trailers in particular. And we're going to start out with a movie, like I said, that I just had no interest in, really. And it's F1. So they released the first trailer for F1, and it's a very short spot, 32 seconds. But, and in reality, it's like 25 seconds with the title card and everything at the end. But guys, the more that I hear about this movie and the more that I see from this movie, I'm getting excited. So first of all, it's starring Brad Pitt. And Brad Pitt is great. He's not my favorite actor, ever, but I mean, he's really solid. He turns in great performances. It's Brad Pitt. Of course, it's going to be great. He's obviously super charismatic. My favorite movie, just as a big baseball fan, that Brad Pitt was in was Moneyball, actually. I love Moneyball. What a great movie that is. Super underrated even if you don't like baseball. It's a really great, anyways, I'm on a tangent here, but he's going to be starring in F1. That's great. The next thing that I think is actually even more exciting is it's directed by Joseph Kosinski. Now, if you don't recognize the name Joseph Kosinski, that's probably because he hasn't done a whole lot, except for a little movie known as Top Gun Maverick. And the way that movie was shot, in the air, all over the place, doing all these aerial shots and all these kinds of things. Top Gun Maverick was one of the biggest surprises of 2023. It was awesome. It was one of the best theater experiences I've ever had. I had no interest in the movie, but everyone was like, you gotta see it. And so on a, random weekend or weekday in May, I just went to the theater and saw it, and I was just blown away. It was incredible. And so the fact that he is doing a movie with another vehicle kind of, maneuvering thing where, I don't know, can you call it a gimmick? I mean, maybe, but if you do it that well, I don't really care, right? I mean, it's incredible what he was able to do with planes. Again, like flying fighter planes that I couldn't have cared less about that kind of stuff. I didn't even, I didn't watch the first Top Gun, and I watched Top Gun Maverick, and I was just blown away by what he was able to do. So again, I'm not into Formula One, right? I'm not into F1. But guys, I mean, based on the trailer, and also the way the trailer was edited, it was so snappy and so quick. Whoever did that, bravo. Big kudos, because I love the pacing and the energy and the freneticness of this first big game spot. And yeah, I mean, I think that the way he's directing these cars, just the kind of POV shots that he had in Top Gun Maverick as well, this looks great. I'm really excited. I think it's coming out in June or July. And while I don't know if it's going to make $1 billion, I think I predicted it to make a lot of money, though, in my end of 2024, early 2025 predictions. I think that this movie could be another sleeper Top Gun Maverick kind of hit. If it hits $1 billion, would I be shocked? I'd be surprised, but would I be shocked? Absolutely not. So I think based on this little teaser, we didn't, again, get much. We got some shots of Brad Pitt, because of course, and we got some shots of the cars, which it looks great. I mean, it's visceral, and the sound design and everything. I think if he brings the same sensibilities to this as he did with Top Gun Maverick, then I think we will all be big winners here in the summer when this film comes out. So I was excited, or I was not excited rather, to see, or to really, I was not looking forward to, I guess I should say, F1, but I watched the trailer, and the job of a trailer is to make you more excited, and I'm more excited. So guys, what did you think about the big game spot for F1, the Formula One racing movie from Brad Pitt and Joseph Kosinski? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, I was actually considering not talking about this trailer or this big game spot because honestly, it doesn't have a whole lot, but it has enough new stuff, compared to the first trailer that I think it's worth talking about. So let's talk about the big game spot for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. This is one of the movies that I am the most excited about in 2025. You can go check out my top most anticipated movies of 2025 podcast episode that we did, or podcast segment. I'm beyond excited for this final, quote unquote, final Mission Impossible film because I just, similarly to how we talked about the F1 trailer compared to Top Gun Maverick, Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning Part 1 was one of the best movie theater experiences I've ever had. I'm not even kidding. I remember being in the theater, right? And I remember sitting there and just watching the movie. I was like, yeah, it's a Mission Impossible movie. Of course, I'm, somewhat excited to see it. And I liked Rogue Nation. I liked Fallout. I liked Ghost Protocol. Well, those were the only movies, or the Mission Impossible movies that I saw in theaters. But, I was like, yeah, Mission Impossible. Tom Cruise is getting older. Does he still have it? And by the end of the movie, I remember it's summer 2023. I walked out and I said, this is one of the best experiences in a theater I've ever had. I know they promoted that motorcycle stunt over and over again. The train sequence was better to me. That train sequence and every single car ratcheting down, that was incredible. So yeah, needless to say, I was beyond excited for this new Mission Impossible film. And this Mission Impossible film is being retitled from Dead Reckoning Part 2 to The Final Reckoning. And we have our next little bit of promotional footage. And look, like I said, it's not a whole lot of new stuff, right? It's similar shots to what we've seen. But I think there's enough new here. So, we have, I think the shot that stood out the most to me was the shot of Tom Cruise hugging Ving Rhames. And I think this movie, more so, obviously because it's allegedly Tom Cruise's last Mission Impossible movie, is going to be, I think, leaning a little bit more into the emotion, right? Because we have Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, now Haley Atwell has joined the crew. I think Vanessa Kirby, I believe she survived the last one. I think Rebecca Ferguson was the only one who died in the last one. So yeah, we got some of the old crew. I think Angela Bassett is in this one as well. So it's really going to bring back everybody from the older Mission Impossible films. I think even some of the older cast, like in the first 3 films that came out in the 90s and early 2000s. And I think that, seeing that shot, for example, and I think that makes that final line where he says, again, it's the same shot from the first trailer, but he's like, I need you guys to trust me one last time. It makes it kind of hit home a little bit more because it's like, oh yeah, like this is going to be probably the last mission we see Ethan Hunt on in general. The other thing that stands out to me is the amount of sheer just action set pieces that they were able to show glimpses of in 30 seconds. You have one underwater, you have one on that plane. I think there were a couple others that I'm forgetting right now, but it's like 4 or 5 separate action set pieces, which again, the franchise has been known for, but it's ratcheting it up every single time. And at a certain point, you kind of go, when is it going to hit the ceiling? And I thought that the same thing about the last one, and turns out I was wrong. It really was incredible what they were able to do. And so in this movie, maybe they're just going to throw everything against the wall. Tom Cruise is an incredible, crazy person, daredevil, who just, risks his life to do these kinds of stunts. And I personally wouldn't do it. I wouldn't encourage anyone else that I know to do it. But, he does it, and the product is just phenomenal to watch. So, it's really, really cool to see. I'm excited. I'm waiting maybe for one more substantial trailer. The movie's still 3 months away, 3.5 months away. So we got time. But it's nice to see, and it's also nice to see that Paramount is making this final push for the final Mission Impossible film, which I think is going to be really cool. I have to rewatch the 7th one in preparation for this because I love that film. And so I'm really excited for this 8th Mission Impossible film. Guys, what did you think about the big game spot for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, one of my favorite childhood memories, and it still sticks with me to this very day, is going into the theater and seeing the first animated How to Train Your Dragon film. That film was one of the first instances, and alongside with a lot of Pixar movies as well, but really one of the first instances outside of Pixar where I went, wow. animation it can feel different. It feels different than the usual slapstick kind of animation, which, yeah, as a kid, it's funny and you like it. But as you get older, you start looking at these films and you're going, some of these are different, right? Like Inside Out, Up, Toy Stories, and Ratatouille's and Monsters, Inc., and then How to Train Your Dragons. They're different. They're a little different because the first film, and by the way, for those of you who remember the first film, it has its dark moments. I mean, at the end of the film, spoiler alert a really old animated film, but I mean, he loses his leg. And it's a touching film between, boy and his dragon, boy and the dog kind of film. But it's a touching film. So they announced they were going to make a live action remake. And in general, on the concept of live action remakes, I've been a little hit or miss with them. But this was a film where I was like, okay, let's see what you got. So they released the first trailer. And guys, when, it's on the YouTube channel, it's on the podcast. I loved the first trailer because it just harkened back to everything I loved about the first film. It just felt so right. And so I watched this first full-length trailer that was released right after the Super Bowl, a couple days afterwards, and I loved it. Now, look, I admit that the rational part of my brain goes, well, okay, I mean, what's the point of this? I mean, I shouldn't be giving my money to these studios so that they can just keep remaking their old stuff, right? That shouldn't be what's going on here. We should be, praising them for originality and going to see those films, which, I try to as much as I can, for Pixar and Disney and DreamWorks and whatnot, right? Because, those are the films that we want to see, the original films. And why are we, leading into the corporate, quote unquote, corporate greed or whatever of just having them remake their old stuff? And, in fairness, some of it works and some of it doesn't, right? For example, I think the remake of Mulan from Disney was really bad. I thought the remake for Little Mermaid was good. It was fine. Beauty and the Beast, good, fine. But then you have films like Aladdin or The Jungle Book, which I really liked. But then on the flip side, you have Lion King or you have Mufasa, which I was like, not my favorite. They were okay. They were fine. So it's just been hit or miss, right? And this one's even more so because for films like Jungle Book or Aladdin, for example, yes, of course, they're very close to the source material. They have the same songs, Whole New World, Bare Necessities, etc. But I love those two films, and they deviated from the source material a decent bit, right? So at the very least, you can cry yourself to sleep knowing that, hey, at least, at the very least, it's not the exact same, right? Well, this How to Train Your Dragon film looks the exact same. It looks the exact same as the original. So on the one hand, the rational side of my brain, like I said, should be going, wait a second. This can't be right. We can't be doing this. We can't be allowing a film to literally shot by shot remake an animated film into live action and then just telling us to watch it because that's crazy. On the other hand, the second, and it's always the same thing. In the first trailer, in the Super Bowl spot, in this full trailer, it's always the same thing. The second the music starts playing, I get emotional. I'm not saying I start breaking it out into tears or anything, but the second the music starts playing, something in my heart triggers. And it's like that inner child remembers sitting in that theater, watching that first movie, and it remembers the joy, and the love and the heartfeltness of that first movie and all the amazing things. I think I saw that first movie maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, and it just, the inner child in me remembers all of it, and it just swells. And I watched the trailer. And yeah, I even recognized that joke at the end from being not just from the movie, right, where one of the twins, the twins with the Viking helmets, gets tackled by that tiny dragon, right? I don't just remember that joke from the original animated movie, which I do. I remember it from the original animated trailer that was playing before the movies. That was also in the original animated trailers. That is a shot-for-shot remake. I'm 90% sure of it. Not just from, like I said, not just from the film, from the original trailer. I remember that. And so again, it's very easy for me to be cynical about all of that as well. But I just can't help it because it's the same director, it's the same guy playing Stoic, Gerard Butler, and the kid that they got to play, Hiccup, Mason Thames, I believe, you could have tricked me into saying that he was the guy who voiced Hiccup originally. It was Jay Baruchel who originally voiced him, but you could have tricked me. I mean, the voices even sound the exact same. Toothless looks the exact same, and yet there's just something about this that speaks to me. I have admitted before I'm a hypocrite in this way, but guys, I would be lying to you if I didn't say that this was one of the most anticipated movies of the year for me, because this just, I don't know, maybe eventually there will be a time when there just isn't anything to remake because nobody is nostalgic for anything Disney anymore, right? I mean, I don't know. They're still trying. They're going to do Tangled and they're going to do Moana. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see if those kids are old enough. Now, Moana came out like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's crazy to me. But anyways, whatever. Tangled 15 years ago, 10 years ago. So I don't know, maybe a little less bad. But yeah, I mean, that's crazy to me. But yeah, How to Train Your Dragon. Look, I mean, I would rather them make a fourth How to Train Your Dragon film in animation, to be quite honest with you, or I don't know, do other things in that universe. But man, I would be lying to you if, when Hiccup is riding Toothless, and I remember the scenes where all the kids are riding their dragons for the first time, and you see conversations between Hiccup and Stoic, his dad, and it's all just great. We see Astrid too for the first time. The actress who's playing her, I don't know her name, but she looks great. She looks pretty much exactly like how you'd imagine the animated version of Astrid looking. And obviously the interactions between Toothless and Hiccup. You have the scene where Toothless is drawing in the sand. Guys, I don't know. Could this movie be perhaps the biggest encapsulation of corporate greed, in terms of movie making that there ever was? Sure. But is this one of the most exciting movies of the year for me? Absolutely. I love this trailer. I can't wait for the movie. Let me know in the comments down below, guys. Do you have that same nostalgia for me, or do you look at this trailer and you go, oh man, they're just doing a shot-for-shot remake. That's boring. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. And the biggest trailer to come out of the Super Bowl was, of course, the new trailer for Thunderbolts. Now, if you've been following the podcast, if you've been following the YouTube channel for any point of time, really, since the Thunderbolts marketing has started, you guys will know I am very excited for this movie. I think that Thunderbolts has the potential to be the most solid, if not the sure bet of the 3 MCU films coming out. Because yes, I think Fantastic Four, based on the trailer that we talked about last week, looks amazing. But sure, it has some variability, and it may just not work for a lot of people. It might have that Eternals factor for all we know. I loved Eternals. I really did. But a lot of people didn't, and I respect that. And so it might have that kind of factor to it. But Thunderbolts, it just seems like the most return to form Phase 3 kind of MCU film. Phase 3 type MCU film, where they were just churning out solid hit after hit after hit. When the floor of Phase 3 is something like a Doctor Strange or even a Guardians 2, which I really enjoy both those films, or Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel. Most of those films I really enjoy still. So it looks like Thunderbolts is getting back to that level of quality. My one criticism with Thunderbolts right now is nothing to do with what we've seen. It's the fact that I think we've seen too much. And yeah, I know the film is coming out in less than 2.5 months, and I get it. It's the Super Bowl, right? So really my gripe here is, this is a good time to have released a trailer. And the problem is that they released another trailer like a month and a half ago that was 3 minutes long. Wouldn't you have wanted to save that maybe for early April or late March? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe the timing of it is a little awkward. I don't remember, honestly, for other May MCU releases when they released their final trailers for those films. So maybe this is just a thing that they're doing now. I don't know. Couldn't tell you. But anyways, we got our new trailer for Thunderbolts. And regardless of if I think they're showing too much, and honestly, if they release another trailer, we're probably going to have to talk about it here on the podcast. But if I had my choice, I probably wouldn't even watch anything else that they put up, because it's been a lot. But I will say, everything that we've continued to see from Thunderbolts, I've really enjoyed. I still think this is actually the weakest trailer that they've released. I've liked the other two a little bit more. They released like a 2-minute one early in the fall, I think, or mid-fall, and then they released a 3-minute one in the winter. And so here we are with this new Thunderbolts trailer. It looks like they're really leaning into the characters. And I think that is such a huge thing that Marvel did so spectacularly well in phases 2 and 3, is lean into those characters, right? The character work. And, it looks like Yelena and Red Guardian's relationship. I love that they have that conversation wherever they are. And Yelena's like, I don't think we can do this. And Red Guardian is giving her the pep talk. And I think that that's great. And we even see her get emotional. I think that relationship should be definitely one of the key points of the film. I really like how, I think the idea of Bucky recruiting them. I love the idea of Bucky and Yelena kind of being the proto leaders of whatever this team ends up being. Because again, I don't think it's called Thunderbolts. You can go check out a previous segment I did about what I think this team is actually called. So that's really exciting. It looks like Taskmaster doesn't make it out of the first 10 minutes of the movie, which I get it from a marketing perspective. It almost feels like you could have sprinkled her in a little bit more to make it seem like, maybe had even a fake shot of her just on a green screen in some other setting to kind of throw the scent off, because my goodness, she's not in any of the movie. Like it looks like she's just in that one scene where they're all fighting each other in the bunker. So yeah, that's a little bit concerning to me. Looks like Taskmaster is not going to be in the film for very long. But anyways, yeah, I like what we see from Ghost here. I like what we see from John Walker. It looks like he has more of a personality. Again, not to say that he was bad in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I think Wyatt Russell was being directed to play a very specific version of the I'm this angry white guy trying to take the shield from a black man trying to become Captain America, and he's like, this is my shield and I deserve it and whatever. And so he was being instructed to play a very specific role as that version of U.S. agent. So yeah, I mean, I think that in this version he's just a guy who's down on his luck and he's just a part of this misfit group. I think that works really well. I like how in that one scene, I think Yelena's shooting at him. He's like, it's John, and she's like, who are you? So again, I think it's really good. Red Guardian, David Harbour is going to steal this entire movie. He's gonna be so good. I love because they released a poster that was based on him, where at the end of it he's like, we should be on the Wheaties box, harkening back to the days when all the celebrities were on the cereal boxes, like with that really dumb toy that they always put in there. It's so funny, so good. I love how he just starts cracking up when Bucky is like, I need you guys to help, and he's like, I love that guy. Their relationship, like, I think what I'm the most excited to see is the character interactions between Bucky and Red Guardian, between Yelena and Red Guardian, even between someone like U.S. Agent and Red Guardian, who are both super soldiers, remember? And so I think that that's going to be awesome. And we also get a little more context. I do appreciate that even though we've gotten a lot of objective footage, maybe like 10 minutes now of objective footage, they haven't really shown us the plot, other than I think we're getting a better sense in this trailer now that Sentry is, I think, going to be the villain. At first, it was kind of a question of, is Sentry just a loose cannon? Is he the MacGuffin, Is he the thing that they're trying to protect from another villain? It looks like this trailer is making it out to be Sentry is the villain. It seems like from that congressional hearing at the beginning, which I like that Bucky is there as a congressman, but it seems like what's going on here is that, Val's pitch to Congress, I don't think is centering on the Thunderbolts at all. In fact, I think a new plot synopsis came out where it was like, the Thunderbolts are basically on their own and trying to escape a trap or something like that's set up by Valentina. So it seems like it's really a case of the Thunderbolts are not sanctioned super. Or maybe they are sanctioned by Valentina, because we see those scenes in the Avengers Tower with her in previous trailers. But in some way, I think what she's pitching to Congress is the idea of this superhuman, the Sentry, right? And she's like, the Avengers aren't going to come and get you or come and save you. So now we need a Superman, basically, and that's the Sentry. We do get some shots of the Void, it looks like, and the Void, for those of you who don't know, and this is such a convoluted thing, even I am not super familiar with every little nuance of the Void, but it's sort of this alternate personality, persona, universe, a mini universe. I don't even know, but it's this alternate thing where that kind of haunts Sentry and it's a crazy thing in the comics. You can go look it up. It's crazy. But anyways, it looks like we're getting some of that. I didn't even know if they were going to explore that. So it's the Void is there, and we get to see the really menacing side of Lewis Pullman as Sentry, because in previous trailers it was just Bob, and he's still just Bob. But I think in this trailer we see him rip off Bucky's arm, and I think he's going after them. So it's exciting. And I love, by the way, going back to Red Guardian, I love the little gag at the very end where Yelena's like, have you slept? And he's like, no, I'm going to sleep when I'm dead. And John's like, I don't think that's a good idea that you're driving. Again, I think that while this movie may not have the ceiling in terms of quality that a Captain America Brave New World or a Fantastic Four First Steps did, and I'm just talking about conceptually at least, right? I still think that this is the surest bet in terms of the floor. I think that I don't know how well it's going to do, but I can pretty much assume that it's going to be enjoyable at the very least. And so I'm very excited about that as well. So guys, what did you think about the big game Super Bowl trailer for Thunderbolts? I am personally getting more and more excited, even though I think you guys should stop putting out trailers at this point. But, the marketing is going to do what the marketing is going to do. Just don't spoil anything big and we're all good. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the trailer down below. Alrighty, guys, we have made it to Captain America Brave New World. We have made it to, I don't even know what MCU movie we're on, but I know that for me, in my own personal rankings in terms of the live action movies and shows and special presentations, we are on project number 48. It's crazy to think how fast and how big the MCU expanded, probably for the worse in some cases, but regardless, here we are. So this is going to be my non-spoiler and spoiler review of Captain America Brave New World. So as always, I'm going to be starting out with the non-spoiler section. So if you have not seen Captain America Brave New World, no worries. Feel free to stay on. Feel free to listen. I will not be spoiling anything that you have not seen in the main trailer. So sorry about it if you had avoided the fact that Red Hulk was in this movie. He's been in pretty much every single piece of marketing that this movie has been in. I'm going to be talking at least what we've seen in the trailers about Red Hulk and my thoughts on him in the movie and other things that we've seen in those trailers. But other than that, no spoilers at all for this movie. And then I will be very clearly delineating when we will be diving into the spoiler section, so no worries there as well. And we'll be, making it very clear, and you can feel free to hop off if you haven't seen the film and come back to the segment or the podcast once you have. So here we go, Captain America Brave New World. Before we get into my thoughts on the film, it's important to note that there has been a lot said about this movie. There's been a lot of rumblings, a lot of context, a lot of different things going on, because, this film has seemingly had one of the more troubled productions in MCU history. We don't know. I think it's fair to say we don't know exactly what happened. There are a lot of rumors. There are a lot of reports. I think it's very important to emphasize that these are all speculation and rumors. I think what is clear is that this film did undergo some changes. I think that much is clear. The extent to which those changes, how big they were. And I think, for example, I think it's pretty clear and pretty obvious that Giancarlo Esposito was inserted into the film, I would say somewhere around the 3/4 mark or the halfway point of production, somewhere after that. So that's an example of a pretty significant change. But other things like, they reshot the entire 90% of the film and all that kind of stuff, I don't know. I don't believe that personally. But again, I think there will be a lot of postmortems done, and we'll see what comes of that. So this film went through a lot of, production troubles, I would say, but we don't know the extent of which that was going on. The other thing to note here is that this is a film that is following up a television series in the MCU, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I would wager to say not a lot of people who watch Captain America Brave New World have seen. And that is what it is. It's just part of the strategy that Marvel is employing by having these TV shows come out now. It's the same thing that they did, going from WandaVision to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. It is what it is, right? I happen to think, before seeing this film, I said this before in other various podcasts and segments, that, I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier stood to benefit more from just having a TV show, in terms of the fact that you actually probably didn't need to watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but you could have gone from the Endgame scene where the old Cap, Steve Rogers, handed the new Cap, Falcon, Sam Wilson, the shield, and then you could have gone from that to Captain America Brave New World. Because I think, as we get into my thoughts on the film, that some of the complaints that people have had about the film is that there are some redundancies, but a lot of those redundancies are redundancies from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right? So a lot of these plot points and beats are replaying themselves in in Captain America Brave New World. But I think it's because Marvel kind of felt pigeonholed to have to explain to audiences who had not seen the Falcon and the Winter Soldier some of the things that were going on. For example, there are some scenes where Sam is still struggling to take up the mantle of Captain America. And you would have figured, oh, sure, we had a whole series about this. But, there are people who haven't seen the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and they just went straight from Endgame. So you got to kind of bake that in. Stuff with Isaiah Bradley, right? Isaiah Bradley is a character who is entirely in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and nowhere else before in the MCU. And his character is here, and I think if you didn't watch the show, you'd get a pretty decent idea of who he was. You might not have any idea why Danny Ramirez is playing Joaquin Torres, a new Falcon, but then again, Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson just kind of came out of nowhere, and I say came out of nowhere. He was introduced in the Captain America the Winter Soldier, and he was fine. So, I think that that's fine as well. There are other MCU connections, obviously, in this film, such as the, giant thing sticking out of the Indian Ocean, right? What could that be? And all the implications that come with that particular plot point, as well as all the returning characters from other MCU movies, most notably, of course, being Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. So, I think this movie, had a lot of uphill battles to climb, and of course just reestablishing Captain America as a brand, both in the real world and both in the MCU, and of course reestablishing that Sam Wilson is now Captain America as well. So there are a lot of things going into the film. Now, let me dive into some of the things that I really enjoyed about Captain America Brave New World, and some things I didn't enjoy. But before we get to that, just some overall thoughts. I'll just give my overall thought on the film. I think it's okay. I think it's actually decent, is what I would say. And maybe, I was thinking about this after I watched the film. This film probably stands to honestly get a little worse as rewatches happen, right? Because one of the things that I liked the most on the first watch that I think will actually diminish its value in future viewings is the fact that there's a lot of intrigue in this movie. There's been a lot said about that, about said intrigue that, it's not done as well and it's kind of, not leading anywhere, et cetera, et cetera. I actually thought it was probably one of the stronger parts of the movie, the political intrigue and the back and forth and things like that. I actually think that certain elements of the story and a good chunk of at least what they were going for in the story were really strong. I'm a person who really likes, and I'm going to say this in not capital P politics, but lowercase p politics, in movies. And what I mean by that is, for example, a show like The West Wing, or even just The Winter Soldier, for example, a political thriller, right? I really enjoy political back and forths where different things are happening across the world, and treaties are happening, and there are fights over territories, and what's going to happen to the world, and you're the president of the United States, his actions have consequences. I really enjoy that kind of thing in movies and television shows. So that part of this movie was there, a lot of the stuff going on, because one of the main characters of this movie is the president of the United States, and he, played by Harrison Ford, he does a lot of things that have consequences, right, throughout the movie and across the world. And I think that a lot of the things that they were doing in that regard actually worked really well for me. It clicked a lot better, I think, in the second act. And once you kind of start seeing what's happening, all the puzzle pieces are being laid out and the plan is being set into motion, you're like, oh, okay, really interesting that this led to this, and this was meaning to lead to this, and there were characters going through here and going through there, and now it's all kind of culminating in this and this and this, and it leads to the third act. So I was like, okay, I think that's really, really solid, and I think that a lot of those things were good. In terms of the cast, Anthony Mackie, I think, is really good, really solid as Sam Wilson, Captain America. I don't know if he was given the best material to work with in this film, but I think for what he was given, he does a good job. And, one of the things I said in my predictions and hopes segment that I did last week in the episode of the Access Blockbusters pod is that at the end of this movie, I really hoped that I would believe Sam Wilson could lead the Avengers. And I think it's hard because I don't know how, even in the best case scenario of this movie, that you could come out of it, saying, I believe 100% that Sam Wilson could lead the Avengers. And I think that has less to do with Sam Wilson as a character and Anthony Mackie as an actor, and more the fact that we just haven't seen any iteration of this new Avengers team come together. Right, we haven't even seen characters like Shang-Chi and Moon Knight and She-Hulk or whatever characters they're going to put into the Avengers. We haven't even seen them, again, since their original introduction into the MCU. So for any character, I don't care, Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, it would have been hard, and it would be a little strange to see all these characters together and have a leader. But I will say that at the end of this film, I was bought into the idea that Sam Wilson is a leader, and he's going to do a great job in Doomsday and Secret Wars or whatever they're going to do there, and have him be a strong leader in the Avengers. Other characters, I think Danny Ramirez as Joaquin Torres / New Falcon is okay. I can see potential in him to grow, into the role. I think this movie, because again, you guys got to remember, some of the characters in the MCU were not the strongest in their first appearances as supporting characters. For example, I think that Scarlett Johansson really grew into the role of Black Widow. I don't think she was the strongest character in Iron Man 2. I think Anthony Mackie is an exception. I think he was pretty strong in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. But other characters, I think that it takes time for some of these characters, and so I'm willing to give Joaquin Torres a little bit of a pass. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie, some of the scenes that he was in this movie were a little goofy and a little bit not uninteresting, but certain parts of his character in this movie were interesting, but then they just kind of didn't know what to do with him in certain other parts. Harrison Ford is great. He is given the most to do, I would say, out of any character. I think that's true, and I think he does a great job with it. I think that he is playing the president well, but he's also playing kind of a tortured character with a lot of baggage on his shoulders, and I think that that's really interesting. And of course, the elephant in the room, I don't know how much of it he was doing, but Red Hulk was good. Like I said, I've been skeptical of the idea of a Red Hulk since basically I first kind of realized that's where they were going, and they've been setting up this character, let's be honest, since he came back in Civil War. Just some of the things they were saying there. So I was skeptical of it even back then. But look, for being a skeptic, I'm pretty sold after this movie. I was like, yeah, okay, I see it. And the CGI, by the way, for Red Hulk, really good. You've seen it in the trailers, you've seen little bits and pieces. It's good. It's really good. Other characters, Giancarlo Esposito. We did a segment revealing who his character was, but for those of you who don't know, because they didn't reveal it in the trailers, I'm not going to say. It was good, and he's always an intimidating presence, but he wasn't in the movie that much. There's another, there are a couple other supporting characters that I thought were pretty good, pretty interesting as well. And I think that's pretty much it. You got Cap, you got Harrison Ford, and other characters are kind of jumping in and out of the movie. So I think that the cast for the most part was pretty good. I think, really, though, jumping into now things that I didn't like as much about the movie. I think that the story, so the concepts in the story, right, the political elements, because I do like some of the things that they're doing here. And I do like the way that they integrate other parts of the MCU into this movie, for example. And there are villains that come in that you remember from other parts of the MCU, and there are other characters that you remember that come in from other parts of the MCU, and other concepts, I should say, that come in from other parts of the MCU, while also setting up things that will come into the future. Obviously the giant mass in the middle of the Indian Ocean, that's been something from the MCU that will play a part in the future. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, from other trailers that it wasn't really highlighted in the main trailer, so I'm not really going to talk about it. But yeah, I mean, those things were interesting, right? Like I mentioned, the political angles were really interesting. I think the structure of the story, though, or the pacing of the story, I think the first act was really bumpy, actually. The first act, we're getting our footing, we're being introduced to a lot of things, and things are just kind of happening, And then I think the second act does a lot to connect those things together. And so you're starting to understand, okay, all right, I see where we're going. And actually, the beginning of the third act was really solid, really, really solid. And then I think the movie just abruptly kind of cuts off its momentum at the very end, because I'll talk more about this in the spoiler section, but I think a few scenes at the very end and a few scenes at the very beginning, or even cutting some things down in the very beginning, would have really streamlined the story a lot better. There's a couple things. There are a couple things. One character in particular that I think needed some more time, needed some more space in this movie. This movie is 1 hour and 58 minutes, and we don't want all of our movies to be over 2 hours if they don't need to be, but I think this movie could have benefited from maybe 10 more minutes from another character here and another side character there, and I think it would have really helped a lot. I think that some people have been complaining that the dialogue and exposition is really obvious and really heavy-handed. I think there are scenes where that's true. There are a couple scenes where you're like, okay, you guys are just talking, and we need to kind of move on here. There are a couple scenes though that I think were really good. There's a conversation in particular between Sam Wilson and Thunderbolt Ross that I really liked, and I think a lot of the conversations between the characters, are in service of kind of explaining and grounding the movie into what's happening, right, in terms of the intrigue and the politics that are going on in this movie. So I thought that was good, honestly. I didn't have a ton of complaints. Like, I wasn't listening to the movie and going, cringe, the dialogue is just awful. Again, there are some scenes where I'm like, yeah, it could have been a little bit better. But, overall, I wasn't too dissatisfied about that angle of the movie. I just think overall, when you look at Captain America Brave New World, as we wrap up my non-spoiler thoughts, it could have been better. And I think that's something, maybe that's unfair to say, because we want to judge all the movies that we watch on their own merits. I do think it could have been better, for sure. I think that it could have been tightened up, and then you could have added those extra minutes to another character here. Like I mentioned, a very specific angle that I want to talk about more in the spoiler discussion. And I do think that some of the parts were a little bit slow and a little bit, uninteresting. But I think overall, the story had enough there to keep me entertained. This is by no means, I think, a bad movie. While I don't think it's necessarily even a good movie, it's like, but by good, I just mean, like every facet is good and it's competent and all that kind of stuff. I think it's decent. I think decent is the word that I would give the movie. It's not great. It's not bad. I think it's decent, And I think that at the end of the day, you have some really good stuff going on with Sam Wilson as Captain America. He's being able to lead his troops into battle, if you will, metaphorically. And I think that the story, I think, wraps up and culminates in such a way where you go, okay, I understand where this was going. And I liked a decent amount of what they were doing with it on screen, the execution, because again, it's one thing to do concept well, but not execution. And so I think that a decent amount of it, I was like, yeah, I get it. I understand where we're going, and let's see what happens here. So look, Captain America Brave New World, not my favorite MCU movie. Certainly, not going to be in the upper half, I don't think, but I don't think it's terrible. I don't. And maybe that's not something that it's not the praise that the MCU wants right now. And I do think Thunderbolts and I do think Fantastic Four are going to be great. But, this movie, I think it had enough good in there where I go, yeah, I enjoyed my time there. So those are my non-spoiler thoughts on Captain America Brave New World. But let's get into my spoiler thoughts here really quickly before we wrap up the segment and wrap up the podcast. So if you have not seen Captain America Brave New World, make sure to just, save this segment for later and come back to the podcast or this segment once you have seen the movie. I hope that was enough time to stall, and let's get into the spoiler discussion. So I want to address the third act part that I was talking about earlier. This was one of the first things that I thought about after the movie was over. I liked the lead up, right? I really liked Because I was a little worried. We'd heard reports, and I'd heard reports that Red Hulk wasn't even in the movie for that long. And I was like, okay, well, he's being pushed in all the marketing, so it better be worth it. And I do think it was worth it. I think that the lead up going into the final battle in DC was good, because you're like, okay, it's building. You see the rage building up in Harrison Ford, and it's like, okay, we're getting somewhere. And then once he breaks out, you're like, yes, okay, I get it now. He's the nuclear option, and the leader really wants to see, or wants the world to see, Harrison Ford's Red Hulk, Thaddeus Ross is, who he really is, right? Just a monster. That's all great. The thing about the way the movie ended, though, and it was really abrupt for me, because, I think the whole idea of Sam Wilson talking Red Hulk down, and that's all fine. I almost thought that Betty Ross was going to show up there, just like how Lois Lane showed up for Superman in the Justice League theatrical cut, and Superman kind of calms down there. I think, that's kind of what I thought was going to happen, but it didn't. Sam Wilson was talking him down. That's fine. It's good. I think that was fine. I think, though, my realization was, after that happened, after Harrison Ford transforms back into Harrison Ford, I thought, okay, now we got to confront the leader, right? Because, to me, Red Hulk is not the villain of this movie. He's not the antagonist. He is the nuclear option. He is the disruptor of the movie, right? He's sort of the thing that is going to explode at any point, the ticking time bomb, if you will. But the leader is the villain of the movie. And when he got himself captured at the very end, I was like, okay, let's see what happens here. Fully expecting there to be another confrontation, between Sam Wilson and the leader or something else. Like, it was almost setting up the, this idea that, okay, leader's going to get himself captured, and then he's going to break himself out, and then there's going to be a final confrontation. I'm not saying physically, just, whether it's them talking or something is going to happen. Like one final act from the leader that will end the film. And it just kind of ended. So that was something that I was like, oh, interesting, disappointing there. And I think it made the ending feel very abrupt for me. The beginning also, again, just a little bit bumpy there. I think that the stuff in general, like clips, if you were to watch clips of this on YouTube of him fighting, the Serpent Society and stuff like that, it's fine, it's good. But I think that it's not until the second act, once you start realizing, okay, so they were being set up to go to Mexico, then they were being set up to bring Isaiah Bradley into the White House, and then, Isaiah didn't kill President Ross, and he was sent to prison, and then, all these different things about the treaty falling apart. Like, that's when the stuff got interesting to me, because that kind of stuff reminds me of episodes of The West Wing, for example, the political intrigue, the back and forth between different nations, between the US and Japan, and all that kind of stuff. That's really good. That stuff really works for me. So I enjoyed that very, very much. Other characters that I didn't mention in my non-spoiler review, Tim Blake Nelson as the leader, design was okay. I don't know how you pull off that look from the comics in live action. He has just a crazy looking head. So they opted for a little bit of a different route. They didn't opt for the light bulb, bulbous, really, really bulbous head as in the comics. And I think it's fine. I don't think they needed to adapt it really one-to-one, in my personal opinion. And it looks fine. His performance was good. I liked him. He wasn't in the movie that much, and I wish he was more. Like I said, I think, I was alluding to maybe adding 10 more minutes somewhere with another character, and it was this character, the leader. I think we really needed more time with this villain that could have elevated him from being kind of a forgettable villain at the end of the day, to being, something that is really good, like a manipulator, a mastermind. And I just don't think that that's really what, that's not really what happened. And I think that that's a little bit disappointing there. The other character I didn't really talk about was Ruth, the Black Widow agent. And look, I know I'm not, I'm paying attention to these kinds of things. There was a lot of controversy around this character. I'm not here to talk about it on this YouTube channel. That's not really what we're here to do. You can go check out any other, resource, any other news website. They're all going to be talking about this and from many different angles and whatnot. I'm just here to talk about the character herself. And I found the character a little bit annoying at first, but actually kind of warmed up to her as a character. I think that her relationship with Sam Wilson and Joaquin Torres was decent towards the latter half of the film, where she actually got on board with everything. I think it was good. I think the character grew on me as the movie went on. Again, we are not here to talk about all the other stuff. You can totally have all your opinions about this character and about all the different things. That's all I'm going to say about the character Ruth. So anyways, moving on from there. Yeah, I think overall, look, it's not a perfect movie. I like the stuff on Tiamat Island or Celestial Island or whatever. Adamantium kind of just became a MacGuffin, and I think it's interesting enough. And obviously, if you're a Marvel fan, you know that Adamantium will eventually lead to Wolverine and all that kind of stuff. So they didn't really talk about it that much, unless I missed a big Easter egg, which I probably did. I probably missed a bunch of big Easter eggs there. But, And Serpent Society didn't really do anything. It was very clear that Giancarlo Esposito was just kind of shoehorned in there. And I like Giancarlo Esposito, but, it makes me wonder, man, I mean, Sidewinder of all characters? I don't know. Maybe Sidewinder is going to be a huge villain in the Daredevil Spider-Man movie or whatever. Probably not, but I mean, here's hoping, right? Because he's kept alive. And speaking of kept alive, the post-credit scene was a big nothing burger. It's just Samuel Stearns saying, "Oh, multiverse," and then stay tuned. I actually really thought at the end of the movie he was going to say, "They're coming," Doom. I thought he was going to say Doctor Doom's coming, and he said others, and I was like, okay, that's a little bit lame. He could have said Doom, and we all would have been like, oh, okay, Doom is coming. I think it's interesting now, though, and maybe this is something we'll talk about in future episodes, maybe in next week's episode of the Access Blockbusters pod, where we're assembling a very odd collection of characters in the raft. Zemo is there. Lest you forget, Zemo is in the raft. We just didn't see him because probably Daniel Brühl wasn't available to show up. But, Zemo is there, and now we have Stearns there, and we have a Red Hulk in there. We actually have people who could have ostensibly been in the Thunderbolts. And by the way, Thunderbolts, we'll talk about Bucky in just a second, but Thunderbolts, Thunderbolt Ross is alive, and after everything that happened there, one has to imagine there is some distinct connection between, the name, the Thunderbolts, and Thunderbolt Ross, right? There has to be. It's just crazy that there wouldn't be a connection there. So we'll see how that plays out. I told you guys, pivoting to Bucky, I told you guys, it's on record, I told you guys Bucky would show up, and sure enough, Bucky showed up. I knew it just made too much sense, and I even said there's probably some connection there between him running for Congress, being in DC, and him showing up in the movie, and sure enough, Bucky shows up, which I think was, it was good to see him, really good to see him. Like I said, there are some redundancies in the movie. That conversation was one of them where Sam is like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if Steve picked the wrong person. They had that exact same conversation in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, honestly. But I get it because, for people who hadn't seen the TV show, I get it. I mean, you got to rehash some of the things. So, there is that. The Red Hulk Captain America fight was good. The action over the Celestial Island was good. Again, story was a bit choppy. Some of the dialogue, some like Sam Wilson just driving a car and being on the phone with Joaquin Torres, it's a little choppy, it's a little strange. And I also said earlier on in the non-spoiler section that, I think this movie might not hold up as well on rewatches because now that the intrigue of, okay, who's pulling the strings and what's going on with each nation and stuff, where you can really scrutinize the story now on rewatch, I'm worried that this movie will be probably much less enjoyable on the rewatch, but we'll get there when we do our Phase 5 rewatch, hopefully sometime soon. So I think that's about it, guys, in terms of, I guess the other big thing with this movie is that they're definitely setting up Sam Wilson to be recruiting new Avengers now. That'll probably be happening either in the background or probably at the very beginning of Doomsday, which, to be honest with you, they kept talking about it. They kept talking, we need the Avengers, we need the Avengers, we need the Avengers. And nothing came of it. I almost was thinking, okay, so the post-credit scene kind of has to be, Sam, or at the end of the movie even has to be Sam calling maybe Bruce and being like, hey, Bruce, what's up? I just fought Thunderbolt Ross for you. Or not for you, but, he was obviously involved with Thunderbolt Ross at one point. So, yeah, that's interesting. Also, Liv Tyler showed up. We saw set photos of Liv Tyler at some kind of funeral. So, again, just, going to the fact that this movie changed through production. But she just shows up at the end for one very quick scene, and then she's in a phone call. But yeah, I almost thought Sam Wilson was just gonna, start recruiting Avengers at the end of this movie or in the post-credit scene. But nope, looks like that's gonna be saved for Doomsday, and we'll see what happens there. So again, like I said at the beginning, or like I said during the non-spoiler review, Captain America: Brave New World, it's not perfect. I wouldn't even call it particularly amazing. I wouldn't call it great. I would struggle to call it good, but I would call it decent. I think like a half a notch below good. I think that there's enough to like in this movie. It's messy, and there are definitely parts that I don't love, but I do think that the political intrigue angle and the different things with Red Hulk and all the different kinds of manipulations that are going on with the leader and whatnot really kept me engaged for the most part throughout the movie. And it's not in the top half of the MCU, and I do think the MCU is only going to go up from here in 2025 with Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four and their movies, and then we got Doomsday, Spider-Man 4, so we got some good movies coming up, but hopefully at least, so I'm looking forward to that. But guys, what did you think about Captain America: Brave New World? Did you like the movie, or did you not like the movie? I think the critics are pretty split, and the audiences seem to be generally enjoying it, so yeah, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode 65 of the Access Blockbusters pod. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for joining us for our review at the very end of Captain America Brave New World. Lots of things to come out of that film that we will definitely be talking about in the future, as we do, with any new MCU movie, talking about what happens next, and Thunderbolts, and Daredevil Born Again. So still lots of really exciting things to look forward to at the conclusion of Captain America Brave New World, now that it is out in theaters, but also a lot of other things in other universes and other fandoms to talk about as well. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. Give this video a like and comment down below with your thoughts on any of the topics. If you're interested, of course, in the audio-only version, we are on Spotify, Overcast, and Apple Podcasts, so make sure to check us out there. And yeah, that'll do it from me for this episode of the Access Blockbusters pod, and I will see you guys in the next one.